Pretty fancy with that. Okay. 6 o'clock.
This thing on?
Excuse me. Quiet down, please. 6 o'clock. We're going to call this meeting to order. We have a full board present. All directors here. We have a full quorum. Everyone will please rise. Join me in pledging allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Director Ward, would you please give a brief prayer?
Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this day, Lord. We thank you for all of your continued blessings, Lord, with the much needed rain, Lord. And we just ask that you be with those, Lord, that are still having issues, Lord, with the weather, Lord. And we ask that you be with our countrymen, Lord, and keep our country safe, Lord. And we just ask for your continued blessings for Kinney County. In your name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Okay.
An outstanding meeting.
Ms. Schott, which agenda item were you wanting to speak on?
I was just gonna make some comments, not really any one particular, maybe the options that y'all discussed last time.
Okay. All right, we have a few public comments. That's the next agenda item. However, we're going to hold off on that right at the moment. I believe everybody is here for agenda item number 8, or most are. So we're going to get the presentation from District Hydrologist Vince Claus on what these options are for future DFC. Then we'll open it up for some questions and answers from the public. Then we will have public comment on what everybody thinks the board needs to do, and then the board will take it up. Mr. Claus, if you would please.
They got it. Yeah, they know where these cameras are. Yeah. So, good evening. Hopefully everyone's had time to review the memo that we provided to the board here. Today, I plan to just go page by page through the memo, kind of outline where we made some changes in terms of our analysis, where we found some new data, kind of taking a page by page approach. And then at the end here, we'll discuss the frameworks. I learned my lesson about calling these options. So we're trying frameworks this month. But we'll be discussing different DFC frameworks, and what I'm looking for at the end of all this is going to be additional direction from the board in terms of which frameworks we want to explore further. Some of those things that we talked about last month were that this is something that normally happens over a 5-year period of time. We're trying to squeeze all that into 3 months now. So making sure that we're not wasting time in terms of evaluating framework that the board may not be interested in is a key priority here. In this, we've discussed pros, cons, different ways of looking at things, and it really depends. What are your priorities? Is setting the DFC somewhere that aligns to historic data with the chance that you may fail it from time to time a priority? Is something that aligns to current climatic trends a priority? Those are things that the board's going to have to think about and consider. But today, if we could get to a spot where we've identified 1 or 2 frameworks that we're interested in evaluating further, I can go back to my team. We could put a lot of numbers into this. My thoughts are we'll create some matrices that look at different scenarios of using historic data, current data, and then we could bring that back to the board for a more informative discussion over what are the implications of any one of these DFCs and then those specific numbers. So today we're not talking numbers. We're only talking frameworks. If there's numbers that we want to discuss in today's meeting, I'd be more than happy to do that. But the goal of today's meeting is just to decide which of the 4 frameworks, or is there an alternative framework that the board would like for us to spend more time. We're actually plugging in numbers, crunching data, and then comparing that to different historic time periods in terms of better understanding what periods of time would that DFC have maybe failed, when would it have passed? I'm using the pass-fail terminology. Another way of thinking about it is when we would have met this DFC, when we would have not met this DFC in time. A couple other things that we'll start considering later on are what are those implications if we don't meet the DFC? We have House Bill 2078, which is something new that we all have to work towards as it specifically relates to how we're tracking and monitoring compliance. So one of the things that we need to keep in focus is how are we going to pick a DFC, but then enforce that DFC? What data do we have to use to make sure we're working towards achieving that DFC? These are all conversations that we'll have at a later date and time, but it's okay to start thinking about that now as we think about these frameworks, because we will discuss one in particular that I'm a huge fan of. However, I don't think we have the time to do that over the next couple months in terms of fleshing out what all the implications are if we decide to go that route. We'll get to that one here in a little bit. But to start things off here, I've got page 1 of the tech memo. There are some changes. Those changes are, we have some more data that we incorporated. One of those key pieces of information came from Dr. Ron Green. He provided us some historic pumping and spring flow data that we previously did not have. We're also not constrained to the existing DFC in this analysis. Previously, all of our work was aligning to the existing DFC. So we were talking December 31st averages, yearly averages. That was something that we were handcuffed to because of the framework of the existing DFC. We're no longer handcuffed to that. So here we looked at things in a variety of different ways. We were able to look at data in slightly different ways. Therefore, some of our averages changed. So I'm assuming that's something a few of y'all have noticed at this point in time, but that's because we found new data. We weren't handcuffed to the existing DFC, so we were allowed to get a little bit more creative and think outside the box in terms of how we were pulling all this data together. I think that's it for page 1. Any questions before we go further? No? All right, page 2 here. We have the different data sets that we investigated that we brought in on this analysis. For Los Moras spring discharge, Bennett and Sayer, LPG Guyton, there's a 2010 study that was then tabulated by Dr. Hutchison in 2023. And then the USGS gauge stations. We've got A and B here for the different gauge stations here with time. Climate, we brought in precipitation, gross evaporation, and net evaporation data. We looked at La Nina, El Nino frequency to see if there were any implications that related to that, and spring flow. Also looked at the Palmer Drought Severity Index. Groundwater pumping volumes, looked at data from what Jim Burton's put together here. And then also brought in the data from Dr. Ron Green and some of his previous works. Static water levels, all the data the district's been collecting here, all that great data, looked at that as part of this as well. So, questions? I'm going to stop after each section in case anyone wants to.
I do have a question.
Yes, sir.
This Palmer Drought Severity Index.
Yeah, you like that one, don't you?
Yeah. I don't.
I figured with the last name there.
Yeah. So I don't know who, I'm not related to that person probably, but
Yeah.
Maybe I am. But no, I don't like it. What use is it?
It's
really for an aquifer?
So it's something that other GCDs use in terms of tracking drought severity, in terms of what that does for them in terms of where they want to do drought management, and at different times based on different drought severity levels, what level of drought management do they want to do? For this purpose, we were looking for different data sets that were easily accessible with long records associated with them that we could use to correlate to spring flow. That one in particular, we'll get into that here in a minute. It takes a look at how severe drought is or how wet.
I know.
Okay.
I know what it is, but I don't understand why it helps really what we're trying to do. And you can get to that, I guess, later. I know you included it in one of the options.
We'll
get to that.
Let's ask that question here
because in a way, I don't know that it helps that much.
We'll take a look at that here in a few minutes, and then I think that would be a good time to address that.
Okay, we'll get back to it.
All right. So once again, we used a correlation approach in terms of how we were drawing kind of which data sets were more strongly or less strongly correlated to spring flow. This time we were able to remove ourselves from the handcuffs we had related to the 20 years of pumping data and the 20 years of spring flow data. We're able to extend that timeline in terms of some of these correlations that we were using to better understand what may have a stronger influence on spring flow. And so one of the comments previously was about, well, we're using end of the year pumping. Like we know things change throughout the calendar year. Yes, we understand that. We're able to get a little bit more creative in terms of how we were looking at some of those relationships now because we did remove ourselves from that existing DFC. For page 2 here, I think that's about it, unless there's any additional questions. And just a final point on the correlations, it draws attention towards where we think there may be more time worth investigating into one. So, for example, the El Nino, La Nina cycles, really poor correlation, no correlation. So at the end of the day, we said we're not going to spend any more time even looking at that now. The models are showing us that that climatic event is not correlated to spring flow here. So instead of continuing to spend time on that, we said, you know what, it was good. We looked at that. Now we'll move on elsewhere. Yes, sir.
I have a question on that. You know, the good years and the bad years have showed since they started keeping record on this.
Yeah.
Does that not have an effect on those good years and bad years that we've had, the El Nino and La Nina? On the good years, it would show that probably the El Nino or whichever one that produces the most rain would have an effect.
And that's what we thought here, but in the last,
I'm not talking about
Yeah.
spring flow. I'm just talking
Yeah.
about the overall aquifer and the
Yeah.
water situation. You know, any year that you're getting more rain than you normally do, living here in the desert, you know, it's improving.
Well, and that was our assumption, which is why we looked at that. However, when you look at the declarations for El Nino or La Nina, those time periods didn't necessarily correlate well to what we're seeing out here in terms of wetter and drier periods in time.
It didn't correlate with the graph that you had,
Not as well as
the
we,
yearly.
not as well as we thought it was going to, where you would have what would be considered a wet rainfall climatic regime, so the El Nino. But then you would look and you're like, well, this is when spring flow's at its lowest. And so there were some points in time where things didn't align well when we were just looking at that. So it's one of those things we looked at, but we didn't get
Well, I
that
mean,
far on it.
I'm just as shocked at that one as you are. I
mean-
figured it would match right up to it.
Yeah, that's
Well, I mean, I
that's
know
what
it's
we
not gonna
thought.
match right up to it.
Well, I
But
figured it'd be
it
close.
gives it time, well, yeah, but give it time to have to get down into the aquifer and go through all the straps of the ground and all that.
Yeah.
Because what rains here, we don't get in our aquifer.
Yeah.
It has to rain above us, northwest of us, in order to feed the aquifer down in this area. So,
I think this speaks to how unique this recharge area is. It's not regional, you know, it's not extending up to Austin. It is a very localized area, and if the rain doesn't fall in the right spot, you know, you can get rain all around you, and it can look really wet. But if it doesn't fall in that recharge zone, you know, that's just bad luck there at the end of the day. But that's weather and climatic patterns for you as well. So page 3, Los Moras spring discharge summary data. Have a simple table here. Once again, presenting things as daily means, monthly means, annual means, just kind of looking at those differences. We have the minimum for those periods of time. One thing worth identifying here is daily means. That's taking into account every data point where we have a daily measurement and averaging it together. That's important because we have a lot more recent daily mean data than we do historic data. Monthly mean, taking all the monthly measurements we have for that month, averaging them together. The last 10, 15, 20 years, measurements for each single day, averaged together for a month. Why this is important, because when we look at data from the 60s, it's sporadic. So one data point ends up becoming that monthly mean average then. And then if we didn't have data in a given month, it didn't end up as part of this mean. So that historic data wasn't
sketchy.
being as represented as well in the daily mean averages, but it's represented better in the monthly mean averages because it had more weight then. And then when we get to annual mean averages, same thing. You could have one measurement in an entire calendar year. That became the annual mean average. So what this is showing us is it depends how you want to look at the data. If we want to look at it as daily mean data, Average spring flow is 17.7. If we look at it as monthly mean data, average spring flow is 20. If we look at it as annual, 19.7. So we have to be very careful of how we're looking at this data and how we're defining it. Because if we define it as monthly or mean, it's giving more weight to the historic data. If we defined it as daily, it's giving more weight to the more recent data because we have more recent daily measurements. So I want to point that out because as we're thinking about how we should go about picking a framework and then defining that DFC, this language matters. If we say annual mean, it's giving more weight to the historic. If we purely just look at annual mean measurements and keeping in mind some of those years only have one data point, which could be at a very high time in that spring flow, or it could be at a very low time. So important to point out because words matter. This is where I talked about at the last meeting. We have to be very careful about how we go about defining the DFC because something as simple as daily mean versus annual mean has pretty significant implications. We're talking about a 3 CFS range there between those numbers.
When you say that, at what date did we start getting fairly regular?
So what we put in the memo is 2003 is the most complete continuous record from 2003 to present.
So prior to 2003, it's
And some years were great. Some years we had daily measurements for nearly every day, but then other years we had one. So it's definitely
Since 2003, there's days that we didn't have any readings, is what you're
no,
saying?
since 2003, that's the
2003,
start of the
okay.
continuous record.
Okay.
And there may be days in there where instruments were offline, but in terms of when it's maintained,
More consistent.
a
since
continuous
2003.
recording program,
But then since
that when it moved?
2014, it's been
it's
way
been
better.
right. Well, it's been moved from the initial
Yeah,
station.
but
I was fixing to ask if that was when they moved it.
No, so 2003, that's when USGS was doing a better job of daily readings there for us. And then in 2014, it moved, and there's some changes there that we're not going to get into today. But you're right, 2014, things did change there in terms of how this data is being collected and how some of those numbers, may not be perfectly representative of where they were in the past in terms of those measurements. So, any questions here?
Can the clerk ask a question?
Hang on a minute. Who's got a question?
I have a question.
Shoot.
You know what the DFC on the spring is right now? It sure still ain't 20. It ain't 19.
Well-
It ain't even 16.
Actually, you're asking what the current spring flow is.
Yes.
Not what the DFC is.
Well, spring flow, okay.
Yeah.
That's my ignorance. I'm new at this, okay?
Well,
What is the spring flow?
I'm only
I understand,
clarifying.
and it's
That's-
okay.
That's all. Just
It's okay.
clarifying. We're talking about spring flow.
Today, 2.8, 2.3.
Yeah.
Okay.
According to USGS.
I have a question just about the difference between the daily
Absolutely.
on, and Vince, I'm really asking if you can confirm my understanding of this is correct. One of the big differences on the daily.
Please keep it down.
But before 2003, when the USGS didn't have a gauge on the spring, they would come out manually and measure the spring flow. So they'd come out sometimes once a month, sometimes a couple of times a month. And so that is why you got the daily data. But presumably, spring isn't changing drastically within a month. And so is it fair to believe that they measured 15, whatever it was, in one day? That's still a reasonable estimate for that 1 month, maybe not for the whole year, but for that 1 month.
I think it works there when we get really spotty in the historic period and we see one measurement in June at 54 CFS. And we're like, did they just come out because it was a really strong event and measure that 54 CFS? That's where there's some numbers that get a little skewy. No one wants to come out here when the spring's not flowing. People want to come out here when it's exciting. And so that's the one thing to keep in mind is once we actually start getting to the 60s and 70s, we have 2 or 3 measurements and they're all well above 24. And so we're kind of like, was it like this the entire year, or was it because this was after those extreme weather events where they came out here? Now, more recently, and the early 2000s, late 1990 to, early 2000, when we're still getting lots of monthly measurements, probably if they were opportunistic when they were in the region, they came down there and they got a sprinkler measurement.
A little more accurate when they've got 4 or 5 measurements within
But
1 month.
it's when we start getting more into the historic period where we're kind of looking at the numbers and we're kind of scratching our head. Sometimes they're good, sometimes they're 17 CFS, but then we tend to have a lot on the higher end, and maybe that's historically what the spring was doing.
Yeah.
But it does make us wonder if there was more of a, hey, they just got a lot of rain down there, let's go take a look at it.
Sure. No, I think it's fair point. And then the second part of that is all of these numbers include the recent 5 years where we've had increased pumping. For those of us that believe pumping is impacting the spring, correct. It would include the impact of that pumping on the spring. And what we're saying is that the daily need is including more of that period than the monthly need. I just want to
So
confirm
you're
that.
correct. Table 1 here.
Okay, I've actually looked at the same thing on my phone
Yeah.
here. I'll take it.
Yeah, that is correct. That's why we then broke it out in table 2 and then table 3. So table 2, we look at those differences. You're right, that's the period of record there, table 1. Table 2 on the next page, we look at scenario, the scenario 3 period, which is 1950 through 2005. And then we look at the drought of record, the 1950 to 1957 drought. Then we look at the 2011 drought. So we were cognizant and aware of that, which is why we then broke it out in table 2 in a slightly different way.
Okay, great. Thank you.
We got the 2020 draft, 25 draft.
We've got that in here as well, sir.
What does it show?
Let's move on with the presentation, and we'll get to all the Q&A. Everybody gonna get a chance to ask questions.
All right, so any other questions on page 3? All right, page 4, as we were just discussing, we have table 2, which looks at that scenario 3 period of time. You'll notice the mean is actually higher now than it was last month when we were discussing this. This is because we brought in that LBG guide pumping data that previously we were uncomfortable using because the way it's plotted in that report is in a graph. Well, then digging through some of Dr. Hutchison's old documents that he left the board, we realized, well, Dr. Hutchison has this memo here with this really strange spring flow data. We started doing some homework on it, and we were like, okay, so Bill's tabulated this LBG guide report data somehow, so we're going to include this now. So that's the reason that scenario 3 number has changed, because we found additional data we were now comfortable with using. So that average is actually higher than it was last month when we were discussing this. But then if we look at the drought of record, that 1950 to 1957 drought, 15.6. When we look at the 2011 drought, 11.3. And then we look at this current drought, we're at 7. You looking at this, those numbers look to be different from last month's discussion too. That's because we were able to move away from that end of year average. We were looking at all data within that period of time now. So once again, how we look at this data, how we decide what the DFC will ultimately be based on this data, it's very, very important. We get our wording and our understanding of what we're actually trying to say and very correct, because as you're seeing from all these tables, you can lie with numbers depending on which direction you want to push things. So we need to make sure we're very, very aware that end of year average, daily mean average, monthly average, those all mean different things. And then table 3, what we did is we just looked at this where we're looking at 2, 5, 7, 10-year moving averages, just trying to think of things, okay, like over a 2-year period of time, rolling. So starting in 1900 and 1902, then from 1902 to 1903, we looked at those averages over 2-year periods throughout the period of record, did the same thing over a 5-year moving window to where you're moving 1 year at a time and recalculating your average just to see if that showed us anything differently. And that actually showed us pretty much everything was very similar when you looked at it that way, because it's able to average dry versus wet years in that type of approach. We're not just thinking about the dry drought period. We're not just thinking about the wet period. We're allowing those periods to merge together when you use that moving window approach.
Quick question, Vince.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if this is the time, but the median and the mean, looking on page 4 at the bottom here, those are similar numbers. And in the current DFC, there's a median and a mean. And the median has never been proofed anyway. And anyway, we can talk about why that's in there or not in there when we get to that maybe,
Yeah.
but, do you have a preference?
So
I mean, if you're gonna pick one, it would,
we,
I don't know, which
It-
one do you think is a better
well,
tool?
in the appendix, we have our spring discharge. This is the very first page of the appendix we provided. And why I like this first chart here is because that actually is the data skew. So you can see we have a lot of measurements that are spring flow less than 20, but we also have a lot of measurements that are spring flow higher than 20. But what this is doing is we have a right skew to our data where we have these extreme weather events that are skewing our data far to the right, which pulls the average further to the right. So 17.7, but it leaves the median back here at 12.6. So the median is what is that central tendency of our data? So the median is more reflective of what you would typically expect, because what's happening is you have all these extreme weather events. When I say extreme, I'm talking 40 CFS and higher, that then drive the average higher. But when you look at what is that central tendency of spring flow, it's actually lower. So for that reason, I like median because it doesn't allow the data to be skewed. We'll get into some skewness of the data here in a little bit. What happens when the spring's at 0 CFS? It's at 0 CFS. That's also skewing the data because we don't know how severe or how extreme the water table declines are when we're stopping our calculations at 0 CFS. So
Yeah, okay. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, most people use mean from what I've seen, but you know, there is an argument
well,
that the median might be.
but when we use these moving averages like this, notice the median and mean are almost identical across all of these.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when we saw this, we were like, okay, this moving average thing, we may be onto something with this in terms of how we go about thinking about the DFC. It allows us to merge across wet and dry periods in a way that we may not be able to do if we're just focused on drought and we're focusing on wet period. And then it provides us a mean and median that are very similar here.
Okay, thank you.
All right, page 5. This is the climate data. We're gonna gear you up for your question here. So we looked at a variety of different things here: precipitation, gross evaporation, net evaporation, the El Nino oscillations, and then the Palmer Drought Severity Index. Kind of looked at all of those in terms of their correlation to spring flow at Los Moras. We have this table on the far right that provides our R-square value, and the only one of significance was the Palmer Drought Severity Index. So this is for your question now. What does that mean for spring flow?
How is that even possible if the precip, you know, and whatever, it's just rain has been a common argument by some people. If it's just rain, how could the correlation be 0.8? And I didn't plan this question,
Yeah.
but I mean, no joke. Like if it rains where it's supposed to, and
Right.
we all know that the rain event happened and the thing came up to 30 in like a day,
Right.
how can it not be way more correlated than 0.8? I don't know.
So specifically, as we were looking at precipitation, we were looking at, I'm trying to remember this. We've done a lot of work here.
Maybe
in
it's
the
quad
last month.
807 too, you know,
No,
quad 807's like.
On this one, we did a departure from annual precipitation totals and we went down to monthly precipitation totals. So when you
Okay.
look at monthly precipitation totals, there was less of a relationship any given month related to spring flow.
Okay,
So
and, you know, and that might lead into this Palmer Drought
Well,
Index
so-
thing too, because
The way we looked at this now, it speaks to how this is a cumulative effect, because the last way we looked at it was those end of year annual numbers, which correlated really well. When we looked at it on the monthly basis, it didn't correlate as well. So it speaks to how this is a cumulative effect here, is the way we interpreted that specific data point.
okay.
But the Palmer drought is relative wetness or relative dryness. So we like that because when it doesn't rain, it's usually really hot. So those two factors are layered together. The Palmer Drought Severity Index isn't just one metric. It's not just rainfall. It's not just heat. It's looking at several different variables together, and it creates moving averages with time. And so there's some problems with it because it's a lagging or leading indicator. but usually a lagging, just the way that those calculations work, where
Yeah.
you need rain to get out of drought, and you need drought to get into drought. And usually by the time you're into drought, it's too late. And usually by the time the Palmer Drought Severity Index has registered all that rainfall, you're already recovered and we're still in drought. So there are some issues
Yeah,
with it.
because like that was the case
But-
in history here. It was red forever. Red, severe drought,
Right.
severe drought. Well, it just rained and still red.
And it's going to be that way for
But then
another
the
3
thing
months
comes back
until
and,
the average
but
catches up.
and then it's flowing like good and the
Right.
aquifer's good and woohoo, but then it's red.
Yeah, it was just a way to look at things differently,
Okay.
and that's the one that jumped out to us.
Now, is this on a 5-year period, or is this, you're talking about 2000?
So the Palmer Drought
1950?
Severity Index is something that we do have for the historic record as well.
Okay, but since 2019, Mr. Brusen's chart shows since 2019 that the rainfall and the aquifer and everything is going downhill. Okay, since 2019. Right now, you call in and see the aquifer is in a number 5 drought. And back in what happened in 1950, there's somewhere around 1,800 wells here now. 1950, they weren't 1,800 wells, and they weren't pumping water like they are now. What are we going to do to get to update? Not just going back to 1950. What are we going to do in our times right now to get this thing set for we? None of that matters if we run out of water. I mean, the DFC doesn't mean nothing. All these meetings don't mean anything. If we do not get something done now, or we can get it under control before it gets any worse. Because the aquifer is in a number 5 drought right now.
And we're trying to come up with a new DFC.
And this speaks to just how bad things are. Here's over time from 1960. Here's where we are in 2020. We're drier and hotter than we've ever been before.
Yeah,
So,
I live it every day.
Yeah. I mean, so
But I'm trying to
we've
say,
looked at the historic data, and that's part of all this in terms of what we're trying to do here. I
5
understand.
years ago is history. But 5 years ago, we've been going downhill on the amount of water that we have, plus in ancient history, even in the 60s and 70s and 80s, there weren't as many wells as there is now pumping out of this same aquifer.
Yes, sir.
I'm trying to get to where you get me to understand why a correlation in the 1950s, 70s, and 90s, and 80s, when there's more wells being already put in since those times that are all pumping, and they don't have to be deep, big wells, they're all pumping water. And 1,800 wells in the county is lots of wells in this dry part of the country.
Well, I can tell you, we're looking at all the data, we're bringing it all together. It's telling us a story. The reason this is important, when we think of this historic pumping data, we're able to look at pumping events in past history. Dr. Ron Green, he aggregated pumping data. We're looking at that too. We're piecing it together. I was just joking here, but not really joking. It was, we've got a 10,000 piece jigsaw puzzle. You don't put that thing together in an afternoon. You don't put it together in a day. That's not a weekend project. You work on that thing for months and months and months.
Years. I understand that. I'm trying to figure out why we're going back so far whenever we probably have twice as many wells stuck in the ground.
Because House Bill 2078 requires us to use the available data to come up with a DFC.
And the one thing we do not have here is a groundwater model. What do we have? We have lots of data. So we're trying to use that data. We're trying to provide the board with summary tables, with graphs, so the board can make an informed decision on what the board believes that the DFC should be, the desired future condition, based on both the historic and the current data.
And if I'm not mistaken, we have to get that accepted by GMA 7 after we come up with it, which is why we got the date extension to do this.
Yes, sir.
I don't see where the historic has any effect on the present right now because everything.
When would you like him to start looking at it?
You don't understand, Director. We are hobbled by statute to use the available data to come up with this DFC. You've asked the question. Why are we going so far back? because we have to, because it's the available data to come up with this, which to try and come up with a framework with a new DFC.
I'll go
That's
back.
what we're
I
trying to
understand what
do.
you're trying to say. You're getting a history, but
I'll
it
go back
doesn't always
to the
repeat
jigsaw
itself whenever
puzzle.
you add more puzzles to it. You add more wells in the ground, it changes.
I understand that. And what we know, though, is we have past periods in time that we can use to our benefit here to better understand the system present day. If we just look at present day data, we're looking at very dry conditions. We want to see how this has changed over time based on spring flow in these different periods of time, what that looks like related to pumping. It's those edge pieces of the puzzle. You put them all together, they really don't mean much, but you've got to put them together to better understand how everything fills in the middle.
Okay, my point, what I'm trying to make, Mr. President, Asherton, in the 50s, they farmed that whole countryside over at Asherton and around Crezo, all back in there as farmland.
Mhm.
Perfect water coming out of the ground everywhere in the 50s.
Yep.
Now it's a desert.
Actually, it's come back quite, Winter Garden has come back quite a bit from what it was in the 50s.
But it's
I'm
not-
quite familiar with that history.
I'm familiar with that history. I lived over there and I worked on the places over there. You go to the pastures out there, you got big bull oaks, but there's terraces all over that country over where they used to farm it. It changed.
Mhm.
It didn't come back. That's what I'm trying to get at. It's not going to come back if we don't do something drastic now. It has nothing to do with 1940s and 50s. We
That's
have to
enough.
get something. No, it's not enough.
No, it's enough of the clapping, because what you're doing is you're making a speech here.
I'm
In the
wanting to
middle-
know
in the
some
middle-
answers. That's what I was voted in
Let me
for.
finish.
No, you let me finish because
No.
you're the one butting in.
No, we're trying to get a presentation here, and you're making a speech about what you think we need to do that has nothing to do with what we've got before us.
Still not.
Really?
What we have to do is come up with a framework that we're going to get him to pursue to come up with a new DFC. That's what we're trying to do.
We had the same science 5 years ago. Nobody did anything.
What do you
Same
suggest,
question come
Director?
up
What do
5
you
years
suggest, Director?
I suggest we get something done instead of sitting around talking about it.
Okay.
Get a drought plan and slow your pumping down.
We
That's
have
the
a
way to
drought
do it.
plan.
Oh,
We
really?
presented
It's
it.
not rocket science.
We presented it.
Yeah, actually, stop. That is enough.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
You're enough.
Sir, you're asked to leave.
Not
We
till I-
presented
not
a
till I
drought
speak.
plan.
You're not man enough to kick me out of here.
Sir, you need to leave. We're calling the police and having you escorted out right now. Hit the door.
Just remember what I
Call the
said.
sheriff's office.
Get a drought.
Ms. Hobbs, call the sheriff's office, please.
Sir.
Call the sheriff's office. Right now. That's enough. What happens, excuse me, what happens is we have to set the DFC, then we have to set our rules, and then we have to have our drought management plan. If anybody would care to know that that's the order that we have to do this in, you can ask our council right now. You don't set the drought management plan before you have DFC. You can't. We're here to work on the DFC.
Well, and Director Mindley, I understand and I hear everything you're saying.
I'm just giving a.
We're
point
working
of
within
what
something that's
what
called
happened.
Chapter 36.
I understand that.
I
too.
know you're tired of hearing best available science. Everything we do, everything that I write, everything that I present to this board, I have to be able to defend. We have to be able to use data to defend that. When we're talking about things such as management zones, there's very key language in Chapter 36 that talks about management zones.
Humps over at the Groundwater District. We're having a meeting tonight.
When you're doing this correlation, do you take into account the number of wells that have been added over the years?
Okay. You know, the two-story building.
One moment.
The court.
I'll get your question answered.
The Masonic Lodge building. Okay, we're on the bottom floor. The back door is open. The back door faces the back of the sheriff's office.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you.
Answer the question, please.
I mean, that pertains to what he's asking is, are we taking into account 1950s? And I don't know, I'm just throwing numbers out. There might have been 100 wells.
Yeah.
You know, today there's 1,500 wells. Does that chart, the information take into account the additional well and how it affects the DSC.
We're not looking at the number of wells now.
Okay.
We're looking at wells and water levels in wells though.
Mhm.
What this well tells us here is once the water level gets to about 1107, the spring stops flowing.
Okay.
What these two wells tell us is it doesn't matter what the hell happens at these water levels. It's not related to the spring.
Okay.
So we're looking at wells, we're looking at water levels. We're using data to guide us here.
Right. I understand where you come from on the data.
Okay, let's get through the presentation and then we can get some more questions and answers. And then the board can finally get to the point, we get public comment and we finally get to the point where we take this up.
All right, page 6 in here. This is looking at the Palmer Drought Severity Index, looking at the extremely dry periods, the extremely wet periods, just looking at what spring flow does during all those periods in time. As you would expect, very wet conditions, spring flow is going to be higher. Very dry conditions, spring flow is going to be lower. We use this because the correlations show that there is a relationship that is worth continuing to discuss as it specifically relates to spring flow. We're also discussing this tonight because this is what other groundwater conservation districts use across Texas as part of their drought management strategies. So this is something that other GCDs have already proven is defensible. So that's why we're using the drought severity index in this. As we get into the frameworks later on, this could become important. It may not be important. We may never talk about it again. But if we want to think about a two-tier system, one that looks at normal operating conditions and one that looks at extreme drought conditions, this type of framework is something that may be worth considering down the road, or this type of number metric may be worth considering for one of our frameworks down the road. And then
Maybe not.
or maybe not, or maybe not. We're just trying to provide the board with different
Options.
pieces of data, and not options,
Frameworks. Yeah, framework. I forgot.
All right. Any other questions about page 6 here? All right. Page 7. Looked at groundwater pumping volumes. Looked at it as a total using estimated and measured data. Notice that max number is now higher because we're including Dr. Ron Green's stuff. It's up to 14,973 now for the max. So that's just estimated and measured for all of Kinney County based on all the historic data that we had for Kinney County. Then we went and looked at that specifically for GMA 7. What's the max pumping in any period of time? What's the lowest pumping? So this is now GMA 7 is limited to that 20-year period of time where the district's been collecting data. And then we looked at that also comparatively with GMA 10. What this is not doing is this is not subdividing Austin Chalk from Edwards Trinity. So this is just looking at this just to remember and reframe kind of what the conversation is specifically as it relates to pumping. Yes, sir.
Well, and this might answer some of the prior questions is, you know, you could have 1,800 wells and pump X, and you could have 1,000 wells and pump Y. And that number, you know, you could pump more with 1,000 wells than you could with 2,000 wells or whatever.
Or you can pump more with one well.
So it's more about the total that's leaving the relevant aquifer. You know, and there's whatever, there's different stuff, but it's about the withdrawal. And if it's, you know, 10 wells or 2,000 wells, well, it's going to oversimplifying it. It's more about the total that comes out. But this total that comes out, part of this too is estimated, right? This isn't
so
like actual measured, some of that.
So the GMA 7 and GMA 10, this is based on measured volumes from the district. But you'll notice this max value may overlap with the max value in a different year from GMA 10, the way we put this. It was just to have this here.
Yeah.
But the other thing that's also, this is where we're about to go with these initial static water level observations. Here's the disclaimer. This section is preliminary. What we did is we just did simple scatter plots and then calculated R2 values or R squared values. But what that does is it assesses linear relationships. So on that one well that I showed you at 1107, we know the spring's going to go dry. I mean, we've got a perfect match on the way down. We know exactly what spring flow is at multiple water levels in time on that one well. But then once it hits zero, we know nothing. You have no relationship anymore because it's at zero. So we looked at that to see, is there a way that we could use water levels as a DFC alternative? That's why we looked at this. The data we've looked at shows us we can. The data also shows us there's some wells that when the spring is going down, water levels are going up. When the spring is at zero, we've got water levels that are at all-time highs in some wells. So it shows this is more complicated. It's not one size fits all. It's not one giant bathtub of water. It's a giant block of Swiss cheese with a bathtub flowing into that giant block of Swiss cheese. Bunch of straws poked through that giant block of Swiss cheese, and then water's flowing out in all sorts of different directions into 3 separate bathtubs. Try to visualize that. That's hard.
Creating all kinds of different pressure in different areas.
We've got all sorts of things going on down here, and that's what these water levels are telling us. So
You build a model like the little thing, a little tank.
with enough cheese, we can.
Can we use Kinney County as the boundaries?
She's being money.
Oh, you'll have mice for.
She's being money. There you go. She's being money.
But this is all good, useful information because what this tells us is we can correlate water levels to spring flow in key select wells in Kinney County. All right, so that's the initial static water levels here. It's pretty much a disclaimer, but if you want to look at the appendix, we've got all the wells with water level data, and we show what those relationships look like with time there based on different water levels as they specifically relate to spring flow.
I want to come back to water levels when you get done with your presentation, because a member of the audience was talking to me prior to the meeting and had a really good question about that.
Yes, sir. So the next section, what we've done is we've stacked different graphs just so you can kind of look at this different data we've already discussed. This first one here takes a look at our moving averages, takes a look at spring flow, takes a look at those dry periods, just allows you to see, okay, well, when the spring went dry in the 1960s, how dry was it? Not as dry as it is today. So that's why the historic data is important, because the spring went dry back then, but it wasn't as dry as it is today. So what was happening back then? We had a lot of pumping. This is why that historic data is important, because it's allowing us to slowly piece all this together in terms of what are those impacts? What are the implications? We have to use that historic data to help us make conclusions here.
From the 1960s to now, how much difference is there pumping? Do you have that information to regulate it and set it?
So this next chart here, we actually have that.
One of them stairs.
Historically, pumping's been higher than it is today.
The amount.
Historically, annual pumping has been higher than it is today.
When and what was the amount?
In the 1960s?
So the graph on 41 we showed you.
Okay, which one are we looking at? We're looking at 8?
You're looking at 8.
What's
The graph on
I
41. The
lost
graph on
my
page
page
41.
number.
41.
You're on page 8, but the graph on page 41.
Kind of spells it out. Was that Dr. Green?
Yeah, so
Okay. Go to 41.
I'm headed there.
I think 88.
Oh,
Dr.
right.
Green,
All right.
Dr. Ron Green. And the police story. All right. So
Estimated.
we've got multiple periods of time.
What he's trying to say is not getting to.
Quick question, Vince. On going back
60s.
before the inception of the district where we had reporting, we have, this is in green, it's estimated. How did we come up with those numbers? Is somebody going to ask? So I'm just going to do it anyway. How do we come up with the estimate?
You look at this.
So I actually asked Dr. Green
This side, I'm not
where this data came from. He had an open records request, Texas Water Development Board for the data. And there was a second source there. It was Texas Water Development data, or Development Board data. And it was one of the different ag extensions that had this data at the time.
Maybe
So,
FSA or something like that.
I don't know off the top of my head, but it was some sort of ag group, ag department here. It could have been an RCS, something like that. So he received this data. I'm assuming take it with a grain of salt, but this is the data that we did include in this analysis because he has reported on it with some sources that we believe are valid sources. So TWDB, and then some sort of
And this, but this information is information that Dr. Green compiled and
This is from his
and
report.
shared with us.
Yes, sir.
Gotcha. Okay.
What were we at, 8?
Yep. 8 of 137.
All right. So page 10, just stacking these graphs together now, just so as you want to think about these different periods in time, what does this look like? The one we did on page 10 is we also included the Palmer Drought Severity
Oh, there
Index.
it is right there.
I like that because it shows us, okay, drought in the 50s
Yeah.
was about where it is today, yet the spring didn't go dry in the 1950s. Well, pumping was lower in the 1950s. So pumping is a piece of the puzzle here. That's what we're working towards. But some of those things that also jump out are the 1960s. It was wetter. Spring went dry. We had more pumping. These are all valid, useful points when we're talking about the historic period. Now, just because pumping was higher at periods in time doesn't mean that pumping does not impact spring flow. Pumping was historically higher in Kinney County. That's the only point we're trying to make there. All right, now we're into frameworks, exploratory frameworks. Nothing in here is a recommendation. Nothing in here is an option. I will give my personal favorite this time.
Are you gonna put your neck out, huh?
I will. All right. Are we ready to go here?
Yep.
Any questions before we go into this? No? All right. DFC frameworks to explore. These are frameworks to explore. The board may go a different direction. The board may tell me these are all garbage. The board can do whatever the board wants to do. We've got placeholders in these, which is pretty much plug in whatever number you want to plug in into that framework. And this is something we can defend. These frameworks are written in a way to where they're defensible. The current DFC is written in a way that is challenging to interpret. These frameworks, pick whatever number you want. These are solid in terms of being able to defend these. Each one of these frameworks was designed with spring flow in mind. Any one of these frameworks, in my opinion, keeps the spring from going dormant indefinitely. They don't keep the spring from not flowing, but any one of these, if adopted, no matter what number you plug into spring flow, means that that spring can't go dry for a 5 or 10 year period of time. It doesn't mean that it can't go dry for a short period of time. It's up to the board to decide what number it wants to plug in there. I also want to remind the board, DFC is a management goal. We're talking a management goal for 50 years from now. We make rules as a district. We adopt a management plan as a district. Those are the things that we use that are enforceable, that we work towards achieving a DFC with. Those are the tools we use. The DFC is the goal. We collectively as a district, we make the rules that give us tools to put in our toolbox to achieve that goal.
Bottom line, what we're doing is not for us, it's for the next board.
All right. Greg, could you hear me on that? Did I say anything that's out of line?
No, I didn't hear anything out of line at all.
All right. Thank you, sir. All right. A one-tiered spring discharge metric. Daily mean spring discharge measured at Los Moras Springs shall not be less than, pick your number, when averaged over X number of years, X number of months, X number of days. Very simple, very straightforward, very easy to interpret. We're not talking about a mean. We're not talking about a median. So a single clearly defined spring discharge threshold over a defined averaging period. Daily, monthly, annual, or multi-year moving average. So what could that look like? Daily mean spring discharge measured at Los Moras shall not be less than 17.7 CFS when averaged over 5 years. Very easy, very straightforward.
Averaged over 5 years.
So you could just start a moving average that at the end of every calendar year, you look at what spring flow has been for the last 5 years, and you recalculate that, and you would hope that it's above 17.7. Now, I just plugged in a number here so we can engage in
That's not the
discussion
actual
about,
number.
right, so. Another way of thinking about that, monthly means spring discharge measured at Los Moras shall not be less than 7 CFS when averaged over a rolling 16-month period. So shortening the time window maybe gives you more flexibility in terms of, or maybe forces you to go with a lower number. Whereas if you have a longer period of time, it allows you to go with a higher number. Things to consider there in terms of making sure that whatever DFC you set is something that can be met. We don't want to set a DFC where we're going to fail right out the gate, in my opinion. All right, so some pros. It's straightforward. A lower threshold target is likely to be met during extreme extended drought periods. Multi-year averaging reduces that short-term sensitivity. Some of the cons. If the threshold is set near a long-term mean condition, the DFC may be difficult to achieve during drought. But if you extend that window to 5+ years, more achievable during drought because you allow it to average across drought and into a wet year, hopefully.
I've got a question. I'm not trying to interrupt you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, if we have a drought plan, does a drought plan affect the DFC? Do you keep your DFC? Does your drought plan control the DFC to where we manage to get to that goal every year? Is that what the drought plan is for?
The drought plan can be a tool to helping achieve the DFC.
Okay, that was my question.
Well, one quick thing. Mr. Ellis, are you there? Greg.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm still listening.
Okay.
I have my mute on, so I don't make any noise.
Just a quick deal to make sure we're all on the same page here. We set the DFC, we make rules that support the DFC and the management plan that makes it work, right? Is that the order?
The DFC is set from the time the DFC is adopted by this board, after it's been approved by the GMA already. You then have 2 years to update your management plan. Once you've updated your management plan, then you have 1 year after that to amend your rules to implement that management plan.
Out of order. Thank you.
Okay, I
So
got a
it's
question.
DFC, management plan, rules.
Yeah, I got a question for that.
And you have to be permits to conform with the new
I'll get
rules.
you, Mr. Minley. Hang on just a second, Greg. Go ahead.
How do you enforce these plans if you don't have a drought plan? What's the enforcement on? Who checks on it? How's it implemented if you don't have a drought plan?
The management plan needs to address everything you need to do to manage the aquifer, including how to manage it during the drought.
That's a management plan, correct?
That you can do a separate drought plan, or you can make it part of the management plan. Either way, I agree. If there is a way that we can address drought by managing the aquifer better, we need to have a plan to do that.
In other words, a drought plan is to control, to keep our DFCs where we need it.
To meet it.
To meet it, yes.
Yeah.
And you
It
can't
depends
do
on
that
which
without a
DFC is,
drought
but
plan
yes.
to do that, unless if you set it down to where it's reasonable.
But you can't have the drought plan until you set the DFC, which
We haven't had a drought plan in 22 years.
we have to set. Well, we had a bad DFC, and now we're trying to change it, and that's what's on the table right now is the DFC. Then we're going to have to do the drought management. We're going to have to do the management plan / drought management plan, and then we have to adjust the rules to meet that. It's a step-by-step process we have to go through. Can't do one before the other.
Yes, sir. I understand that. But if we don't have a drought plan, we cannot get any control or even know whenever we need to have any control if you don't have a drought plan and the drought status tells us when we need to do to make our steps to do that. Correct? The management plan doesn't give any kind of guidelines of when or what you're supposed to do. I've read it,
It should.
but it doesn't.
It doesn't now.
We're fixing to rewrite it if we figure out a new DFC. So
Well, that's
it
what a
hardly
drought plan
matters.
is.
But Perry, something else too, and Wes, you can weigh in on this if you want, but we could have a drought plan right now based on the current DFC until the current DFC is overridden by the new DFC. So that could be something that,
Let's get the DFC done and then
Well-
follow the procedures. But this has to be one of the procedures, right, Vince? a drought plan in order to control, to meet your DFC. If you don't, it just all goes to hell because nobody's checking or managing anything.
I would prefer that the drought plan aligns to the DFC.
Yes,
Yes, sir.
but it has to have some kind of control within that, or else you don't have any control. Because a management plan, nobody manages nothing. Tell me what that manages. I've read it. I can't figure out nothing.
That's where we're trying to go, Perry. That's what the new management plan is supposed to do. It will have new rules.
And just a reminder, we just started looking at all this.
Okay, well, I'm
3 months
I'm
ago.
just started too, so that's the reason I'm trying to figure it out.
Give me 6 more months and we'll have a lot of these answers to the
Okay.
questions that you're asking right now.
Okay, but I'm new at this too, so I'm trying to figure it out for myself.
We still have 3 more to go.
All right, so page 12 here, some of those cons. I'm sure I'm going to get hammered for this now that I say that out loud. When we use a single threshold, it's tricky because you set it too low, people are going to game the system. Too low, it's been really wet, we can pump more. You set it too high, you're going to fail out the gate and everyone's going to be unhappy. So there is a balance there. Okay, well, how do we counter that balance? Well, we can adjust that window of time that we're looking at. You make it too short of a window, it may lead to overreactions. If we're looking at 18 months, oh no, we're going to fail, we're going to fail. And then it's going to lead to, in my opinion, overreactionary type management decisions. You set that window too long, it's going to lead to complacency. Where, oh, we've got 5 more years, we're not worried about it now. Oh, we've got 4 more years, we're not worried about it now. So this one-tiered metric is tricky because we've got to nail the number and we've got to nail that moving window average that we're looking at. So just points that I want to point out in terms of where that gets challenging, which takes us to, there's additional bullet points here. I'm not going to read through all of them. There's some board alternatives in there. Each one of these has board alternatives. Instead of spring discharge, we can look at the 25th percentile of spring flow. There's other ways we can get creative there, and that's what we can dig into once we get to the end of this conversation. You provide more guidance. But I like one because it's simple, but it's also very tricky if we don't perfectly nail that DFC as it relates to what is that metric we're measuring and what is that time period we're measuring it over. And then in Bell County, the Clearwater and Groundwater Conservation District, they have a DFC that's very similar to this. Their DFC reads, maintain at least 100 acre-feet per month of streamed spring flow in Salado Creek during a repeat of the drought of record. So here they've developed a drought management plan that uses the Palmer Drought Severity Index to adjust pumping depending on how severe the drought is, but then also considers where we are in spring flow throughout all that. So it's a 2-tiered metric in terms of how they have management tools in place to make sure they're able to maintain that DFC. But there, they default to the drought of record in terms of a repeat event. But ultimately, what they're really saying is we just want at least 100 acre-feet of spring flow through the system.
So that's how
in any calendar month. Yeah. And then they have tools that help them manage that resource there. So I've worked with them now for 12 years. I guess since joining Priest and Nichols, I no longer work for them. The one thing I know they're currently doing is they're exploring how to improve upon their management tools, specifically as it relates to how they're looking at drought. So it's something that is adaptive. It's meant to be iterative. What we do today, what we do 6 months from now, we're doing what's called adaptive management as it relates to groundwater, where as new data comes in, as we have more time to synthesize the data, we can change things down the road too. If we make decisions today that we are learning down the road, there's a better way of doing things too. All right.
I got a question, Vince, before I forget to.
Yes, sir.
There's all this talk about Palmer Drought Index, drought of record, and historically it proves certain things. There's data that shows when this happened. And that's a big part of what's going on. But in reality, what difference does it make if it's a drought or not? Because it could not be a drought. and the aquifer could be mined excessively. Not a drought. You just pump more than you should pump, and then the aquifer is going to suffer. And if you have a spring's going to go dry.
Yeah.
So why do you really care if there's a drought or not? What you care about is groundwater sustainability.
When it's wet, when it rains, do you water your grass?
No.
I don't either. That's money in the bank. Everyone that pumps around here, when it rains, they're not pumping.
But it's not even about that so much. So that's not the only use though. The use could be, and likely will be, as Texas goes into the future, we're going to use our water in a different way, because the demand might mean we farm somewhere else and we market, there's water markets, and we essentially sell the water, right? So planning into the future, you need to just, I mean, there's a lot of things you need to do, but it's not all about if it rains, you can grow hay,
yeah,
and you don't need to use the aquifer. It's about you use the aquifer too much, and the world changes because the spring dries up, and shit happens. And everybody somewhere else that's buying it is happy, but when it leaves aquifer, the people that rely on what that aquifer did to the world maybe aren't happy. So the drought index is a factor. I'm not saying ignore it, but I mean it's more about the situation in the aquifer and how that situation affects surface water and other things.
Yes.
I think we're kind of beating this.
So I'm just saying,
Well, and I think a different way of thinking about that too, maybe the watering your grass and, irrigators, people that irrigate their crops. When it's raining, when it's wet, they're not pumping. So you assume in a dry period, you're going to pump. And I think a different way of thinking about that, based on the data we've looked at, is we had 4,700 acre feet of pumping, and the spring went dry back in 2013, 2014. So that speaks to how important drought is, how important precipitation is to Kinney County, specifically Los Moras, as it relates to spring flow. We had pumping that was well below the average, but it was a drought, and yet the spring went dry. Keeping drought in focus, in my opinion, is a priority, because we have that data point that shows us that there are some very strong correlations with drought, with a lack of rainfall, and spring flow.
Gentlemen, we get a little off track.
Okay, good enough for now.
Now, it's just,
I got you. It's
framework consideration.
No, I get it.
At the end of the day, we may not go there.
I get it.
It's just, that's something that other GCDs have already proven works. It's something that we could defend as a strategy that is tested, it's proven. All right.
There's better way.
I think there are.
Okay,
but
I know
we're also up against it on time.
I know.
All right.
Press on.
And not time tonight, but time for joint planning here.
I got you.
All right. Option 2, a multi-tiered. Let's look at spring flow over a standard period of time. And then let's look at spring flow during drought. We have a metric for kind of when we're not in drought, and we have a metric when we're in drought. It allows for that flexibility. I think that's a very simple way of putting that one here. So pros, it allows for differentiated targets for drought versus non-drought. It explicitly recognizes that spring discharge behavior differs between normal and drought periods. It provides a defined basis for drought management actions. So that drought CFS level, that provides our action point for drought management plans. Those two can align really nicely together. Some of the reasons you may not like it: more complex language. If we do use something like the Palmer Drought Severity Index, it's usually a lagging indicator, so it doesn't necessarily always rely to present day conditions. Achieving the drought tier target may require groundwater production reductions during drought conditions. An average based metric may still allow for short-term dry or no flow conditions. So those are all things to consider as we're thinking about this. Due to measurement methods, runoff during rainfall events may temporarily inflate the actual spring discharge measurement over a short period of time. That's one thing I'm starting to notice about all of these here. The way we've got this station set up is there's some uncertainty. I'm assuming a lot of those zero readings, there's still some water out there, but it's not making it into the creek. So those are things to consider as we continue to think about this. And the reason I bring up that is you have the extreme weather events that bring up the average, but you also have the drought periods that I think bring down the average too. So all things to consider as we're thinking about these moving averages for different periods of time. One extreme weather event where you get a lot of runoff in there can spike up the average, and it's not reflective of reality. So you can still be in severe drought, but because we had one rainfall event that set water down there, we brought us back above the average. So
I wonder if there's any way we can look at that on years that we have average annual rainfall in town. If there's a way for us to look at it like that. So instead of saying, well, drought skewed it down or wet skewed it up, could we isolate the years where we had average annual rainfall and put together some type of metric looking at those where we're not skewing it with the heavy years?
Yeah, it needs to average out.
Yeah.
Right. Well, what is it doing when it's supposed to be, we're supposed to be getting the amount of rain we're supposed to be getting? Because we know that, then when it's bad, we can make adjustments.
Yeah.
You had a question, sir?
Yes, or a comment, rather. The average rainfall will not necessarily reflect the rain or a significant rain within the recharge zone.
That's true, but I'm looking at some way to try and get it to where we don't have this, where we're not looking at it skewed so much. Where we have something that's more reflective of an average year, right? I don't know if we can get there on that, but it was just a thought at the time. I'm sorry I interrupted, Vince. Please continue.
So framework C here, static water levels and index wells. So this moves away from spring flow explicitly stated in the DFC, but with index wells that we can correlate to spring flow, which I already can on 6 different wells that we've just quickly looked at here. We can tell you what spring flow is going to be at each one of those water levels. I mean, Jim's been saying this for 2 years now in terms of meetings I've watched online prior to me ever joining. But we know exactly when a water level's at 1108 in certain wells, what spring flow is going to be, what it's going to be at 1107. I mean, there are ways that we can do this where we're looking at water levels, and I like water levels because we can instantaneous track those at any point in time. We know if we have the right equipment in the right wells, we'll know exactly what the spring's doing based on water levels, where you don't even have to go look at the gauge station. I also like this because what happens if something happens to the gauge station? USGS isn't going to come repair that. I mean, right now they have funding cuts. They may repair it, but odds are the district's finding a solution there. I like the water levels too, because I've previously mentioned this. When the spring's 0, what is the spring? 0. The water level could be 30 feet lower. And the way we're currently conceptualizing all this, we're not capturing that. We just know spring flow 0. It could be a millimeter below land surface, or it could be 100 feet below land surface. It's just 0.
If I may, I thought that we approved equipment for trees that would show the subterranean level. Is that not true?
Oh, that's incorrect.
Well, that's what you said when you were talking about putting the new equipment in there, that it would be able to show when the spring did reach 0, we would still have readings for what was happening under the surface.
More importantly, let's find out what we've got.
And
What have
that's
we got,
exactly
Mr.
what I'm
Burton?
asking.
What have we got?
So there's two separate things. The instrument that's in the spring basin measures pressure on what's in the actual basin. That goes up to 10 feet or whatever it does. We have an instrument in Mud's well, which is 50 feet away, that can tell you how far down it is below the surface. And in the worst case scenario, it was 45 or 50 feet, I think, below the ground surface. And then, Mr. Palmer, you mentioned that one rain event where we got rain in the right spot. The spring in less than 30 hours went up to 40 CFS or 30 something CFS in that particular area. And so, and then in other parts of the county, that rain, I mean, like even, I don't know how much, this goes back into some of your question though, but right now, in the county, that block of Swiss cheese, I've got wells that are artesian condition. There's water flowing out of the ground, and as the spring has continued to come down, water has continued to go up in other parts of the county. And I think some of the complexity, and then going back to look at historical, why is that? And so, Gage, to your question, there's a spring, the transducer, and it's shown on that graph by Mr. Palmer over there, where if there's water in the basin, you can see and how much the spring's flowing. But when that transducer, when that basin goes dry, the depth to water is measured in a mud well. And the well, depending on the time of year, that well is either pumping or not pumping. And we have 4 wells in this county that are taking water directly out of the spring flow and never stop pumping. And so some of the complexity is how much of that is driven by rain, how much of the spring is influenced by pumping. And that's the $1 million question. What is it? And so right now, certain parts of the county, there's artesian pressure. Water's coming up out of the ground. I've got 6 or, I don't want to point anybody out here, but even yesterday, some of the graphs I sent, I've got 6 or 7 feet ahead that's pressurized in the aquifer, water's coming up out of the ground. And so in certain parts of the county, as we go east, we're in stage 5. If I go west over here, I got water coming out of the ground. Why? Why is the spring continuing to go down? One of the gentlemen asked the question, what is it? The spring flow is maybe 3 CFS right now, as measured by USGS. It's really low, but I've got water still coming up out of the ground in other places. Why? And that's the places where people are pumping. So I'm going to tell Mr. Bain, you can't quit pumping. There's water coming up out of the ground. Why is that? And that's the work that Vince is doing to try to lay some of that framework. And let's figure this out. If there's a drought plan that says, let's stop pumping and it's going to restore the spring, let's figure out what that is. If there is a management tool that this board can adopt to help give us some control to keep water flowing back into that spring, what is it? Let's do it. But what is it, and what is it that you can make a decision on that today or next day or the next year or whenever we go to GMA 7 to figure out what that is that's going to give us those tools to keep that spring flowing and healthy. And right now it's extremely complex because water levels are going down over here, they're going up over here.
Okay, let's.
I don't know if that's more than what you asked, but
Did that answer your question, Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Okay. Does anybody else have a question about framework C?
Well,
Hang on, because I got one. I know I got one. But if somebody else has one, we'll get.
I do, yeah.
Please.
So I guess first part of my question is, I guess, part of the concern with using a well or the indicator, whatever, using the SE, is that it is more opaque than just using spring flow, right? Could you, and I think folks like that we can log on and we can see the spring flow immediately. We don't have to wait until the monthly meeting to see what the well is. That's probably fixable. But it's a third party to measure, it's a federal government. Maybe there's a solution where if we say, look, if the federal government pulls out that flow meter, we have a backup. That's the alternative. But could we get the same benefits you're talking about? So that's the science benefits. By continue to monitor the well levels, but still keep the spring flow as the indicator that's easy to understand, easy access, third party to help with confidence, but still get the science benefit. So
Hang on, before you get to there, because that's about what you were asking. Was it 2-tiered on 3?
So the question I think Wes is referring to.
It's very similar.
Before the meeting, if it's possible to have some kind of dual depth DSD that looks at both a well level measure and flow. And spring flow measure. Is that possible?
That sounds pretty close to the same thing. That's why I want to get the answer both.
To answer both, then for me personally, water levels are less opaque than spring flow. As a hydrogeologist, I can look at water levels and I can understand the interaction between wells based on water levels. With spring flow, there's a lot more variables that I think are outside of our control in terms of some of those blips that we see from runoff events. that cause some of those inadvertent spikes. As it relates to wells that are pumping, that are coming on and off, how those may have an influence on spring flow. There's some noise that's introduced in terms of how we're currently monitoring and managing. As it specifically relates to a water level, I can tie water levels directly to spring flow. We've already done it. I've got wells where I know what spring flow is based on a water level in 6 different wells right now. So for me as a hydrogeologist, water levels are much easier to defend because as hydrogeologists, we have tools. There's different ways of creating water level surfaces that we can use that I think provide a little bit more defensibility to what we're trying to do here and reduce some of the noise that we currently have introduced to the spring flow. I get it. I mean, driving in every time, home of Fort Clark Springs. I mean, spring flow is this community. So I hear what you're saying in terms of that being easy to understand. As a hydrogeologist, I'm still trying to figure out the spring flow thing. I've kind of already figured out the water level thing. So I think that just speaks to that complexity in terms of all the variables, all the moving pieces. Instead of 1 well, we could have 3 index wells. We could have 4 index wells. Now option, our framework C here, oh, I said option. Oh yeah, framework C.
Enter that proposed.
This is my personal preferred choice to use water level. Because the water levels don't lie. And then to have a dual tiered spring flow and water level metric, well, if we could correlate the water levels to spring flow, it's kind of redundant then at that point in time. If I know water levels at 1107 mean 0 CFS in certain wells, or if I know water levels at 1115 mean 24 CFS, to say we want 24 CFS with an average water level of 1115, we're just saying the same thing in 2 different ways.
That's okay. Can I respond to that?
Yes, please.
Okay, and I kind of said this to Wes before the meeting too, and I want to try to be careful how I state this, but scientifically, I understand what you're saying. It's clear, it's crisp, it's less complicated. The board has got to try to set policy in a situation where there's a problem of public trust. Many of us have been expressing concern about spring flow for years. And so I think it would be difficult to move completely away from a spring flow I believe throughout the entire history of the district. Since 2003, we've had a spring flow DFC. Is that correct?
No, ma'am, but close enough. It doesn't really matter. It started in 11.
Okay, for a very long time. And so scientifically, yes, but in terms of building public trust and public faith in the GC and in the board to protect the interests of all citizens, include and balance the interests of those of us who are concerned about spring flow with the rights of property owners is very difficult.
And I hear you loud and clear.
But can't that well, and maybe I'm wrong, the well that's 50 foot from the spring, does that mechanically affect spring flow?
Might be 100 feet. Hang on, don't hold me on to that.
I don't
50
know,
feet.
but 100 feet, but can the well in close proximity to the spring mechanically, when it's drawing, can that affect spring flow?
Oh, that absolutely affects spring flow.
Okay, so the spring flow
That's
reading,
pressure. If that's pressure in the aquifer.
so spring flow reading is affected by what happens with the well. So the spring flow is mechanically manipulated by the well. That's just kind of what I'm judging from all this conversation, and from history I've heard others talk about, and also in years past when way before all of us, but when the well or when the spring stopped flowing, they would just turn on the pumps and run water in so that would make sure that there was water in the field. But anyway, the spring flow can be mechanically manipulated because the well is so close. So is it an accurate depiction of true spring flow, or is it being manipulated? And not maliciously, it's just causation.
Well, and
Hang on just a second. We'll get to you, Ms. Brown.
And Tracy, to your point there, everything I've heard from Jim, it does. But what also happens is when the spring's 0 right now, that's a 0 average, a 0 average, 0 average. We're not truly understanding just how severe that drawdown is on the aquifer during those periods of drought. So that's why I like this, because when it gets bad, we don't know how bad it's getting based on how we're currently doing this. Now, as it relates to management philosophy strategies, let's keep the spring flow. This is just a framework that the board can consider. Once again, throw these in the trash, light them on fire, I don't care. But we can develop management tools once we have a DFC in place. Those management tools can be index wells that we use as helping us better understand the health of the aquifer system, and then those can become triggers for certain management zones. So we can, in a way, still keep a spring flow DFC, but then still incorporate index wells or trigger wells as a management tool to where we are still using both. We don't have to force both into the DFC statement. This is the trickiness of this. We're declaring this is our DFC, and we're going to be held to this for the next 5 years.
Jump in real quick.
Yeah, I want to make a point before you do, particularly after what you just said. I want everybody to understand, we're not picking a DFC tonight. That is not what we're doing. What we're doing is instructing Mr. Claus which ones of these frameworks we wish to continue to pursue, whether it's 1, 2, 3, all 4 of them. Okay? We're not coming up with numbers tonight. We're not coming up with a DFC tonight. This is part of the process we agreed to at the last meeting. I said we're going to have a really busy February with a lot of extra meetings, because this is just the first step to figure out which one of these we want to pursue, so we can come back and talk about it again. Okay? We're not making a determination on what the DFC is tonight. We're making a determination on what frameworks we want him to continue to pursue, so we can come up with a new one. Okay? Just to be clear, that's what we're doing. We're just figuring out which frameworks we want to follow.
Now, challenges as it relates to using a water level, we don't have a groundwater model. So to try to turn a groundwater level into a modeled available groundwater, it creates a new unique challenge for us, because we have to align that modeled available groundwater calculation to our DFC declaration. So we can still do it. It's just, it gets a bit trickier, because we're kind of letting the cat out of the bag if we do move away from spring flow. So
It's probably one of the hardest ones to do based on our private conversations. All 4 of these, that's probably the hardest one to do.
I think,
if I'm missing
yeah,
it.
no, I think we can get there in a year. I don't think we'll have enough time in the next 3 months to even do this one. But once again, move forward.
Well, I just wanted to say something. I agree with both Ms. Marsh and Mr. Conley about the idea of the USGS gauge. I mean, there's some reliability issues with the gauge. If you go down and look at it, there's rocks in front of it and what the real numbers are, et cetera. Having this district do something else to put some sort of reliable flow meter, something else that can piggyback on the USGS gauge, particularly do it now when we can compare. You can see what our readings are versus their readings. If there's any way to clear out the creek, I know this is something I've been talking about for a long time, but just through there, so you actually getting a real flow and not stagnant water. I know that when that Los Moras says 0, you drive across the fort, drive across the bridge and look to the right, there's still stagnant water in that creek bed somewhere. There's still water, even though it says 0. I think I've only seen it dry maybe, I don't even know, once, but there's always mud or grass. It's always damp. But have something else for us that we can compare with, additional reliability. If the federal government collapses and we don't have a USGS gauge, we would then have something. But I would support anything to do in addition to the USGS gauge, where we can monitor, look at it, what spring flow, how far water's going down the creek. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, we can get a whole bunch of spring flow, even on that 30, 40 CFS day. It was only getting down maybe to the Red Bridge. I mean, I don't know if it came back to the end of the fort or not. But
I hear future agenda.
Future agenda. I'm sorry, but I just wanted, it's not often I get a chance to agree with Mr. Conley. To say that publicly, but you and I have talked. No, but you get it. I mean, I think that having something reliable down there, I think redundancy, I think would be beneficial. 100%.
Absolutely.
Well,
I say that in jest here.
Sure, yeah. I just want to comment, and I like the back and forth, so I didn't have much more to add other than to affirm that discussion, and I think it would be appropriate to have a static well level to support when spring flow does reach 0, additional data. I think spring flow does need to be the DFC. It needs to be the primary metric, because that's why this community exists here. That's why native people lived here before anybody else got here, is because there was water in that spring. And I think that it can be easy for all of us to get overwhelmed with numbers and nuances, but I wanted to comment in order to bring us all back to the real purpose why we're here, which is to help this community to survive and thrive, honor its history and culture, and that means keeping water in the spring, and that means a spring flow based DFC. I think anything other than that would be putting at risk the future of this community. And I think if we have a spring flow GFC, we need to make sure that that doesn't mean the board is going to manage to the DFC. The board still has to do what Director Minley was suggesting, implement a drought plan to make the GFC to help us meet it. And to that point, I wanted to add more to the discussion on the moving average. I think a 2-year moving average would be difficult to manage to. I think a 12-month average is more appropriate because we can evaluate before each growing season what people are going to be able to use for their crops, for instance. And I think Mr. Palmer made a really good point earlier that that's not the only water use we're looking at. So I agree with Mr. Palmer that the Palmer Drought Index does not cover it all. It needs to be spring flow based, and there needs to be strong policy put in place after this spring flow based DFC is approved to ensure that water remains in that spring. And any other thing, water levels should only be used to make sure that water remains in that spring. That's why we're all here.
Okay, kind of got into public comment there. What I'm looking for is Q&A still. Anybody got any questions about any four of these? Shoot.
So that's to understand, so what you're saying is the correlation is very strong.
We're gonna get there.
It's probably in here on your, but are you saying that the correlation of these wells is so strong that it actually better than any aberration you would see because of a rain delay or because portion of the well that the correlation is that good? I mean, I imagine the correlation is 80, 85%, 90%, something like that. Are you thinking that that correlation is stronger than the errors that you would see in the spring due to a rainy day?
So we've just started looking at this now in the last 2 or 3 weeks. I think the preliminary data that we've looked at, our preliminary analysis, shows us that it is almost a 1-to-1 in some of these wells. In terms of
100% correlation.
Almost. Just looking at the graph, not looking at what those R squareds are, but looking at the graphs, looking at the way those data points are distributed, looking at the perfect linearity on the distribution of those data points, it looks to be that there are some very, very strong correlations in terms of where water levels are in very select wells, not countywide. We're talking very select wells. We've just started looking at this. We're going to continue to unpack this over the next 6 months. But my belief is those wells are already kind of aligning with this bowling alley that we've discussed before. They're already in the area that Dr. Hutchinson previously presented as kind of the management zone 1 general area. Like everything we're doing is aligning with kind of what this anecdotal kind of observation data is, what Dr. Hutchinson did. But we're taking a more detailed look at it in a way to where we believe that there are select wells that do look to be pretty much 1-to-1 to where when water levels at a certain elevation in that well, all I have to do is go down to the spring flow chart and I know exactly where spring flow is going to be, plus or minus a few tenths of a CFS on it. But I like that because then we could take the average of 2 or 3 wells together. We can make sure the wells we select or are choosing aren't being influenced by pumping nearby. There's ways to do this to where I think we can be pretty precise and prescriptive with the way we're using those water level numbers. So where when we know water levels are falling, we know exactly how much time we have until that spring is going to go dry. When we're just looking at spring flow, we get these aberrations in that data that, it's like, oh, we had a blip down. Oh, what? We had a blip up. We're not taking bigger picture. What's really happening here? We have water levels in these aquifer systems that are slowly oscillating up and down, up and down. When we get these big rainfall events, you get those pulses that run through there. Well, those water levels are going to equilibrate a lot sooner than the spring flow will as well. It is my assumption at this point in time. So I think we can be more prescriptive and more precise in the way we're thinking about this system if we move towards water levels. I hope the board doesn't choose that as a framework to continue to evaluate, because I don't think we have enough time. And we're going to spend a lot of time doing a lot of great work, which will eventually be useful down the road. But I don't think I'm going to be comfortable in 3 months in terms of where we are, in terms of saying, yes, this is it. This is going to be our DFC. I would love to explore that, but in terms of getting to where we need to be in such a short period of time, I'm not certain we can get there in a defensible way. I mean, we've got these observations that look very strong right now. But, how far do those go out? What wells nearby are having an influence on those? The other challenge with using monitor wells currently is the district doesn't own any of these. And so if you're going to move towards monitor wells, you want to make sure that those are state, county, or city owned. You want to make sure that if those ever are destructed for some reason, there's going to be a replacement put right next to it. So some of these observations we're seeing are in private wells. And so we can use a private well for this. So from those 6 wells, maybe we only have 2 or 3 that are actually usable. So there's definitely things to continue to work through and think through on this one. But as a hydrogeologist, I like water levels, not because I don't like Los Moras Springs, just because I understand those better than I do the nuances of spring flow out here. Thank you. Yes, sir.
Hey, Jim.
Yeah.
Give us a little history on Tularosa well, just so we're more transparent with the public. Why is Tularosa the well there?
Yeah, well, the Tularosa well was drilled by the EAA, and this is, Greg will probably know the date better than I, goes back to, I think, 2016. And one of the strongest correlations is Tularosa well.
Any legs left?
The struggle with Tularosa, so if
Any
you look
legs
at
left?
We've got one more.
190, 192, 191.5, 192, 1107 groundwater elevation. When that well right now is at a historic low. I mean, essentially it's as low as it's been. But we've looked at Tularosa, and Ms. Marsh, you and I have talked about this, I don't know, for 5 years, but when you look at Tularosa well, that's one well, it's up right off the Campwood Road, 334, going up there right to Grass Valley, Tularosa Road. But that well, it's 800 feet, 770, 780 feet. It's an Edwards well. And when we get rain, we got our big rain event, that well, we start a bump. It started going up, and the spring went up right away. The struggle with that is that Tularosa continued to go down. And some of that rainwater, it went west. And so things started to still go up as the spring went down. But the strong correlation, I think it's about 0.9, 0.88, 0.89, something like that. And that's with 78,000 data points. The struggle with that is that well's not influenced by pumping.
And that well's in GMA 10 too.
And that well's in GMA 10. That's the other complication. We've known that for a long time, but that just all came out lately when we started re-talking about the DFC. That's GMA 10. That's the DFC for GMA 10 is the Tularosa well. But that strong correlation, Director Ward, we've known that that's where the spring is. I mean, that there's correlations, and we can go up and we can find other wells that are not influenced by pumping. So for this board to come up with a plan that does something to try to address that, it's difficult. And we're just, Director Ward, being transparent. What is the answer? I mean, we've got a well that when it rains, that well goes up. And if you look at it historically, it's almost historic low. I think actually about 6 months ago might have been historic. We got a little bump. It came up a little bit, but you're about 190 and it's going down, and the spring is about to dry up again. And unless you get rain, unless Tularosa well, it is an indicator well in the northeastern part of the county that when it rains, unless that well goes up, that spring's not going to flow. And we've seen that since they drilled it. And it was drilled by EAA. So it's a state well. It is now operated by the Texas Water Development Board. It is real time. You can get it online. I mean, we've got API data that brings it into our database real time. And some of that is going to be online. I know we've talked about this, but it's not yet there, but it's all coming in and we can look at it. But that's the challenge, Will, to be honest. I mean, we've got wells that are correlated, but they're not where people are pumping. And so and Vince is looking at this in a lot more detail. I'm feeding him everything. I'm not filtering anything. He's getting raw data. He's getting everything that we've been looking at. Get somebody else's opinion on this. I know Dr. Bill.
We
Sorry,
need to,
I'm
we
just
need
letting
to,
you
we
know.
need to get to the last framework here, folks.
Right.
We still got 4 of
This
these,
is
and we
good
got one left.
information, though. I mean, this is good information.
and-
Why was it?
It's
Let me just
great,
ask
but-
for this. Why was it drilled?
Well, as a monitoring well.
Is there any kind of mechanical pumping going on with that
No,
well?
no, sir.
How many
It
of
was
these
drilled in an
wells-
area where there was no pumping as a monitoring well for the Edwards Aquifer Authority because they felt that it was on the most western edge of the Edwards Aquifer.
How many of these wells on this list are being mechanically pumped? Of these 4 wells?
Of,
One
of which,
of the wells in the presentation. Do you have this presentation?
oh, I'm not looking at them. How many are being pumped? Which wells are they? I can tell
I
you.
think they're all.
Well, I think we're talking about the 5 or 6 that are
No.
highly correlated.
He's got
Is that what you're
the,
asking?
he's got the Lindsay Ranch,
Oh, Lindsay is not being
Okay.
pumped.
the
Okay.
EH2B Rose. is not being pumped.
Rose is a production well. It
Gomez-
is, I don't know that it's being
No,
pumped
no,
right
it's
now.
not being.
Yeah.
It's a
2B.
permit, but they may or may not be
It's-
using it.
It's not it is a permanent well. It's got a diesel engine on it. It is not being pumped, but it could be. If the owner turned it on, it could be pumped.
Gomez #1.
That's
Gomez,
domestic use?
that's a small solar well. He is pumped. It's a house. It's a domestic house, but that's a very good well because it shows we've got similar water levels here, but as you start going that way, you got a water level here, and you go a little bit this way, and all of a sudden there's a lot more pressure, and we've got, I don't know, 50 feet of head pressure change in a very short distance.
Yeah, that one's fascinating to me because
Yeah.
it's located in
Location.
a very
Yeah.
interesting
I'm with you.
location.
I'm with you.
and-
Where's that?
Yeah, so somehow there's some Swiss cheese and things are connected, and you go to the other side of that block of Swiss cheese and water level's way up here and it's not connected.
Well, some of them,
And that's
some of
where
them
we're
drain
going back
faster
towards-
than others.
Towards
All right.
Pinto Valley, you go,
Uh,
what's the other one? There's got to be more.
Tularosa.
Tularosa was
Tularosa is
All
not,
right,
is not
so-
being pumped
Okay.
780 feet.
An example of where a similar DFC like this currently exists here in Kinney County in GMA 10. So, and I forgot to mention the framework 2, that's Spartan Springs. They use the dual, here's average operating conditions, here's drought operating conditions. All right, framework D.
Thank you.
Here's for the big unveiling. Something very similar to what Kinney County already has, a dual statistic where we use median and or median, or mean and or median. Or we get more creative and we use mean with 25th percentile. There's a lot of ways that we can think about the current DFC, but reformulate it to where we're no longer talking about simulation 3, where we're no longer talking about anything but what is important to this county, which is the management of this spring. And so I think we can do that in a way that's thoughtful, that still uses that same framework. Spring flow shall be, X average and or X median over any X rolling period of time. So I think we can still use that existing framework. And this was kind of going to your question earlier about mean and median, where there are differences between those two, but it really depends on what your time period is that you're looking at. So we've gone through 4 different frameworks. We've scratched our heads. We've sat down. We've probably drank way more coffee than we needed to get creative here and try to think if there's anything else outside the box. We really couldn't. We were really looking at what the data we have could show us, and then how that could then be used to formulate a DFC. So 4 options. 1, single threshold under
Framework.
Go ahead, bring it with you.
All right. 4 frameworks. Simple. Let's just do some sort of given statistic over a given time frame. Average spring flow of X over X number of months, days, years. We can do a moving window there over a 5-year moving window, a 2-year moving window, 12-month moving window. Lots of ways to think about that. But the numbers you decide to plug in there are then very important, depending on which one of those options within that framework you decide to go with. Framework 2. Let's go dual tiered here. Average operating conditions, drought operating conditions. That keeps anyone from gaming the system, and it also allows us some flexibility if we enter an extended period of drought. Framework 3. Let's use water levels that directly correlate to spring flow. So if we want spring flow to be 17 CFS, let's find those water levels that correlate to 17 CFS, and we could build a network from those water levels into a DFC. We can use those to help formulate a DFC. And then framework 4, multi-statistics. Let's use mean, let's use 25th percentile. Let's not use mean, let's use median. Let's use that central tendency. Let's move away from mean. So lots of different ways to think about this. I'm hopeful at least one of these resonates with the board, because what we can do from here is we can start crunching and plugging in numbers and data based on the historic data all the way up until 2025. We could look at everything.
Then we have multiple options on each, whichever
we can do
framework we
this
pick.
in a table matrix to where here's what happens if you choose 1 CFS. Here's all the years you failed. Here's what happens if you choose 2 CFS. Here's all the years you fail or you don't meet your DFC. Here's what happens if you choose 15 CFS. So we can look at that historically, and then we could layer that with historic pumping. We can layer that with historic spring flow, and we can layer that with historic Palmer Drought Severity Index data, which we can layer this, but that's option that's if we go with framework 1, very simple approach. You can do the same thing with framework 2. With framework 3, what we would do is we would come back with more data on the water levels, those wells that we think do allow us to look at DFC. Then we can actually start looking at those historic water levels in terms of what happens during zero flow events too, to see kind of what that average could be and what that does look like in a way that's more informative. And then same with framework 4, we can come back with numbers that align with framework 4 if you give us some key criteria there. So we're just looking for additional direction in terms of which one of these the board would like to continue to investigate. If 1 or 2 of these, hopefully you don't say 3, but a couple housekeeping notes on this. This is now very far outside of the scope of what we actually proposed as a task for the DFC support. That was DFC support. It wasn't DFC reformulation and retooling. So I would like to come back to the board next month and ask for a task authorization to continue to fund this effort. So we don't have to discuss that tonight, but I would like to bring that up to the board next month as an agenda item, is to get a task authorization to continue down this road here.
We're definitely asking you to do things outside the scope of the contract. I would agree with that.
I got some questions.
Okay. Well, I want to get it up before us here. Does anyone in the public have any questions before we go to public comment on this item? Just a general question. Do you have any general question?
GMA 7 and 10.
So we're only talking GMA 7 today.
All right, that's a later date. As far as that's concerned, that can't be done in this planning period. That's going to take a state level effort to get that fixed. So that's not anything that's going to happen anytime soon. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am, please.
So with the exempt well, that's a picture we're not looking at, right?
So right now, we're just talking the DFC statement.
Yeah.
The exempt wells, the non-exempt wells, those factor into the modeled available groundwater.
Yeah.
Different conversation for a different date.
Okay. Does anybody in the state of Texas deal with exempt well?
Do you mean has authority over them?
No, I mean, does anybody really have a handle on the volume that gets pumped in any particular district? Does anybody track that kind of information?
Actually, there are a lot of groups that come up with numbers.
Yeah.
I sit on a planning committee, on Region J Water Planning Committee for over 10 years. There's a lot of numbers that get thrown out about what the calculated use is. From my experience, they're all estimates. No one truly knows.
I may make a comment, and this goes to Marty, but we put a lot of effort into identifying exempt wells, getting them all up into a GIS database, looking at them all. We haven't visited. How many do you have so far?
Oh, over like
1800.
Yeah, there's a lot. A lot of them are not being used. In fact, most of them are not being used.
Yeah, a lot of them.
But going out, visiting, looking at that, making some type of estimate, but at some point in this county, we will have an idea of what that is. Do we have it now? No, we don't. It's identifying them.
Getting the correct coordinate.
Yeah.
You have to think about it. When the district was formed, not a lot of people had Google Earth or knew their coordinates to their. So it's kind of figuring that out.
One of the issues in the beginning of the district, whenever you had to register all the wells, they asked for coordinates, and these were the days there was no Google Maps then, okay, and people were using handheld GPSs, and if you didn't have them on the right datum, you got a completely different set of coordinates, and so we're having to figure that out 25 years down the road because the coordinates don't match where the well's actually at because they used a different datum whenever they used their handheld GPS.
Yeah, but that is and has been an ongoing effort for us to identify that.
So you're planning to monitor those wells?
Oh, we monitor a lot of exempt wells as it is right now. I mean, a lot like Gomez Gomez is an exempt well. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've got, I don't know, it's probably 50-50 maybe, or I mean, we do exempt, permitted, non-operational, permitted operational, get real-time water level data, when pumps are on and off. What's that?
I think every well in the county needs to be monitored.
We're working on it. There's a lot of wells, but that's the goal. We're working on it.
That would solve a lot of everybody's problems. You know how much is going out, then you have a little better option of
the production well, there's 115 wells that are under permit. There's 40 something, 46, 47 actual permits. We've got really good data on every one of those. The exempt wells are, it's a lot of them are little solar wells. If it's sunny, it's pumping. If it's not sunny, it's not pumping.
But it's still,
gentlemen,
coming out of the ground.
We've been in here about 2 hours. All I'm trying to do is get some questions about the 4 frameworks that we have before we have public comment. Questions, because you're going to get a chance at public comment anyway. Yes, please.
So we had some conversation about correlation of the wells. There's different folks that believe different things about where pumping impacts the springs. Not litigating that, but have you seen wells in the data set that correlate in Pinto Valley, monitor wells in areas of pumping? Pinto Valley is northwest of town.
So we were only looking for wells where we saw an elbow or a choke point in them. So flipping through all of our graphs, you have it on your phone, just thumbing through that. We were only looking for where we saw choke points. That's as far as our analysis went. We were trying to determine whether or not we felt like that there were wells that we could use to correlate with spring flow. So in terms of any specific geographic area, it was only those 6 wells that we identified that had an elbow or a choke point where we could see, okay, spring flow's at 0. We've flatlined here in terms of what that looks like. So in terms of your specific question, we have not looked at that yet.
Okay. Fair enough. Did you have a?
I'll wait for the public comment.
Any other questions before we go to public comment about it? By the way, anybody that didn't sign up for public comment on this agenda item wants to make a public comment on it, sign up. Will, you wanted to talk to us about this DFC. Please make your public comment. You'll be limited to 3 minutes.
Sure. So I had a public comment prepared. I'm gonna retract that for now. I think that what I would say is we've been working at this for 3.5 years. We initially came in for gracious, we were gracious for them. About a year of that, and trying to work for better reporting of pumping, getting some protections. Things went downhill. It got very contentious after about a year. It's been very contentious for probably the past 2 years. This meeting was very good, I thought, which is largely why I'm changing my public comment here and just kind of going off the cuff. But I will say I really appreciate, Wes, you letting people ask questions of Vince. I appreciate that it was civil and it appears to be looking for a balanced solution. So if this continues, that'd be great. we've been here before where it was civil and it was gracious, and then things broke down. Just being transparent, but with it's encouraging to see this, and so I don't think it's any secret that a bunch of the conservation folks are looking for ways to get help in this area, outside of this group. And I think that if this continues, where we're actually getting some progress, it'd be nice to see this get resolved in here. So I'll just leave it there and retract the rest of my comment.
Thank you for your comment. Will, Carl Moody, I think that's the gentleman that got angry. We don't have to do that one. Miss Brown.
Thank you, yes. I want to echo what Mr. Conley said. Thank you for this meeting. I think about a lot of good discussion on the floor. Thank you, Mr. Claus, for the presentation. Thank you, Mr. Robinson, for opening up the public comment at this point. Because I hadn't planned to speak, but after the presentation, I did want to make a note on my reaction to option 2, being that hybrid between we're going to have a DFC based on a certain metric, and then another one based on drought conditions. I think it's appropriate to have one DFC that's standard, because when we're in drought conditions, that's all the more reason to keep water in the spring, and all the more reason to curtail and conserve water so that it remains in the spring, because it's not just there to look at pretty, it's there for the entire ecosystem that feeds upon it. We're seeing species die in that spring that may not come back after several cycles of it drying up. And that's my concern too with the moving average that the board ends up deciding on. I think, and I hope and I urge that the board consider one that is tight enough to where we can react. And Mr. Claus had a good point to where we don't want to be overreactive and we don't want to be complacent. And I think anything longer than a 12-month moving average would lead to complacency. I think 12-month is appropriate. And I think the option 1 sounds sound to me right now, but I don't want to go too much on record with specifics. I do support a spring flow based DFC and not a changed one during drought, because it's like the water budget is still the same. If the water isn't in the spring, we need to ensure that we're managing to get water back in the spring. That shouldn't change whether it's drought conditions or not. So maybe not the most articulate comment, but I hope it came across.
I heard you favor framework 1. That's what I heard. You like that one better, right? Framework 1.
I like it better. Maybe not best, because there's another one that was also good.
Yeah. You favor that one though. That's what I heard. Just making sure I heard you right. That's anyway. Let's see. What else? Who's the next one here? Thank you for your comment, Ms. Brown. Okay, I've got 2 names on this one: Melanie Telematis and Anita Anaya. That's for a different agenda item. Ms. Schott, do you have a public comment you want to make?
I have something. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. I'm the wife of Director Randy Schott, and I wanted to come up here and say a few words. I'm going to start with how disappointed I am in the community that came here to the last meeting and cheered on Will Conley and Gage Brown. Not one of you reached out to my husband and asked him what his thoughts were on the options that were presented. However, Will Conley went to social, and Dee Dee Brown and Gage Brown went to social media and told or posted what Randy's choices were.
Even didn't?
Yes, you did. And what he was planning on voting on. I find that very funny. When I'm married to him, I asked him what option he was leaning towards. His exact words were, I have no idea because I don't really care for any of them. He said that he needed to really study it more. I got the same answer when I ran into another director and I asked him what his opinion, what option he was leaning for. He said the same exact thing. Sharon Wolf then at the last meeting, and I quote, is what she said, this permitted board. I only know 2 people on this board that have permits. Is that not correct? So I don't know where she gets that information from. And she said that y'all were plotting to control the removal of the DFC. Again, she never approached Director Schott and asked his opinion. I highly encourage you all in the audience and watching online to please do thorough research. Reach out to these directors before going on social media and assuming their stance on issues regarding the water board. Thank you for your consideration in this matter. And again, Ms. Marsh, you said that the community doesn't trust this board. They are the reason they don't trust the board because they lie.
Okay. No clapping. Okay. So we've had the public comment on it. As far as a lot of the social media posts that are going on, this is the reason I ran this differently than I've ever run any other meeting. There's a lot of false information being put out. A lot of people came in here saying that we were deciding the DFC tonight, and we're not deciding the DFC tonight. That's not what we're doing. If you want to know what's going on, I suggest you call the director and ask them instead of assuming. You'd be a lot better off. So now, after 2 hours, the board can take up agenda item number 8. And after listening to all of this, I'm going to take the floor first and make the suggestion that we consider having Mr. Claus pursue both framework 1 and 2. I believe that 3 is a long shot. It's probably the best way to go. It's probably going to give us data whenever we have no flow, but it's the hardest one to do, and we don't have the time to do it.
Are you suggesting that he draws up 1 and 2, or we can vote on it when we come in at
Well,
a later date? Is that what you're asking?
I don't know whether we would vote on it at the next meeting, but I think that what we need to instruct him to do is to follow both. Go ahead and pursue frameworks 1 and 2. One of them's a single point. One of them is double
We're gonna
point.
not number them too, but is it A and B?
Yes, A and B.
Okay.
Yes.
I went that
Thank
far.
you. No, I slipped.
Well,
I slipped. Went back to numbers.
A and B, I made sure we weren't.
No. No, it's my bad. It's my bad. It wasn't yours.
But you're suggesting we he draws up 2 different ones where we can look at them
And compare them.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
I think we should probably
be about
And I can put these in
I think we
tables
need to
to
do
where it's
2 of
very simple. You just look at the x-axis, the y-axis. It shows what that looks historically based on the historic data. If we choose a DFC, what would that have looked like in all, 56 years? Or let's see what that would have looked like through time. But then let's take that a step forward. Let's be forward looking too. Let's take that same DFC. What is that going to look like based on this, where we are currently, as we project a year out, 2 years out, 3 years out, 4 years out, 5 years out, 6. So, and then we can do that using different simulations. So let's assume we continue this drought. If we choose a DFC that has a 12-year or a 12-month clock associated with it, and we choose this current drought that we're currently in, where CFS right now is starting at 3 CFS, 2.81. And if we say spring float's supposed to be 17 CFS, we've got a lot of work to do. So we better pray and hope it rains in terms of ground to make up there. So these are all things we have to consider, but we can do this on different time scales. So we can look daily, monthly, 12 months, and then we can go 18 months, 24 months, 36 months. We can develop some scripts that allow us to do a lot of this very quickly, to where I'm confident we could come back to the board with 10 or so different tables that very quickly point out or highlight where things go south very quickly. If you pick a number that's too low, but also where a number that's too high maybe doesn't capture some of the severity of these things.
I want to explain where I'm coming at with this. Looking at all 4 of the frameworks, 3 seems to be the most scientific way to go, but it's not viable within the time frame that we have. 4 doesn't particularly appeal to me at all. 1 and A and B, I think they do, and I think it'd be good if we had them doing both. That way we compare the single point information versus the dual. And then we can decide which one of those. Instead of trying to just go with 1 out of the 4 right now, I think we ought to do the 2. I think those 2 are viable.
Going to do all 4 of them for tonight. That's what I thought, because I read all that on there.
Right.
You made me read all that.
I hope you read page 126 when it says non-relevant aquifers.
I don't know how many pages.
It's an unfortunate name.
Okay, well, it was just going on forever, and I thought, okay. I thought that's what we were actually doing tonight, was doing what you're.
To get to this point, to put these together, to synthesize all this data, it gave us a huge head start on this next step. But this next step here is still going to mean we're crunching numbers for a good week or 2. But to do that for 1 or 2 of these versus all 4, that's doable. If we had to do this for all 4, I mean, we would need months to specifically the water levels. However, I still wanted to provide that as a framework to consider, since that really is a viable option in our opinion.
I think that's something that this district will need to look at in the future in order to get better information whenever it's not flowing. But for right now, it's not viable for us to try and do that.
Let's try to do this all year long, where when we get to this point at the end of the years, we're not sitting here fighting ourselves over time.
Well, it was.
I know we're working on this one, but
it was a storm of events. I mean, we came on at the end of this planning cycle when you and I came onto this board. So we were at the end of the 5-year planning cycle by then. It's not our fault. It just happens.
No,
It was timing.
Presented earlier, where we don't get in a time crunch. We can look at the science, because the science is going to change between now and next 5 years. So we need to kind of be ahead of that game, where we're not in a bind. We can sit
That's
there
where
and
we're trying to
discuss it in
head.
several meetings and kind of work it out straight. I agree. I don't know if you made a motion to do that.
I did not. I just wanted the board to know what I was thinking, because I wanted any input. You guys might change my mind.
No, I think.
Hang on just a second. What you got?
Vince, I have a question for both of y'all. So when you go through all this stuff that y'all got, if we go through and we set a DFC, are y'all still going to continue with looking at the correlation between pumping and the spring? Or is that still, are you still going to continue that?
So as part of task 4,
No, 3. Number 3, the one that
C.
Yeah, C. So
I see. My apologies. I misunderstood the question. Yes, that's something we plan to do this entire year as it relates specifically to updating the conceptual model, figuring out these water levels across the county and how we have these different pressure planes is a key focus of us. All of this related to the DFC has been a distraction, but keeping that in focus in terms of what the board's already tasked us with doing in terms of creating an updated conceptual model, all of that will come together here as we get into September and October of this year. And then some of these conversations of management zones, drought management plans, wells that are correlated to the spring, pumping that is correlated to the spring. It's all connected, but how correlated is it all? And then how strong is that connection is what those correlations tell us. That's all information we'll have towards the end of this year from the work we're currently doing. Now, some of that might get delayed a little bit here. Right now, this is delaying rules recommendations. That's okay. This is more important. So this is taking a precedent right now. Some of those things, may not happen as quickly as we would like for them to happen now, but that is all still work that we are doing this year based on work that this board already authorized me to do.
Okay, so that's one of the most important things I've always pushed.
Yeah.
Is to be sure that we're not doing anything that's going to affect somebody that has no effect on that spring.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And that doesn't, it also affects the Austin chalk.
Yes, sir.
Any of this other stuff that needs to be done, we need to do it no matter what.
Yes, sir. And the scatter plots in the back of the report show that there's some wells that have zero correlation to spring flow. When I say zero, I mean it looks like someone took shotgun to a piece of paper from 20 yards out. I mean, it is a scatter plot. And so we do see that. And we strongly see that in Austin chalk wells. We strongly see that in wells that are completed into the Butte and Eagleford. So we're already seeing that in some of those other aquifer areas. Now, as it relates to the Edwards, we have some wells that are in the Edwards that, as Jim said numerous times, water levels are going up when spring flow is going down. So
I mean, there's always been the since day one. There's always Pinto Valley, Pinto Valley, Pinto Valley. So I want.
Well, and I can tell you what's happening on the west or east northeast side of Pinto Valley and what's happening on the southwest side of Pinto Valley. There's differences there that we're already starting to see through some of this analysis we're doing. So
I just want to make sure that y'all still study that and,
yes, sir.
and get as much as you can so we can actually see what's affecting what.
And
that's one of the most important things I think that'll end up for us to better regulate what's going to happen with the spring.
Yes, sir.
Is going to be actually knowing where those zones are at.
Yeah.
And what's actually affecting what.
And those two are of particular concern because they're very large well fields within the county that draw water. So we need to know what they're doing.
And Kinney County, relatively small in terms of other counties in Texas, but some of the most complex Edwards, Trinity, BFC geology that I've seen throughout the entire Balcones fault zone.
That's right.
So I've worked up in Bell County, which is the very northern end. Now I'm working down in the very southern end. It's easy up there. It's too easy. It is a bathtub of water.
Yeah.
Down here, it is the opposite of easy. It is not one size fits all.
No,
It's not the back of a napkin type simple math equations here. We're talking something that is very unusual. It's quite beautiful when you look at it from just the geology and just how unique this area is in terms of the entire BFC. The Balcones fault zone. There is something special here. And that's part of why we have GMA 7, we have part of GMA 10.
There's a lot of unique geology that all comes together.
Yes, sir.
Right here.
Yes, sir.
Everything changes right here.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions from the board?
Let me just address Director Bland's question. So that work that you're talking about, the correlations, continue to look at everything we're doing with Carlos and I in the field, everything that EcoPad is doing in terms of equipment installation, monitoring data. And let's talk to Mr. Sadoff today about instrumenting more of his wells. We've got equipment, that's what we're doing. And we're strategically looking at locations to install instrumentation for that exact purpose. Where are the correlations? What is it looking for? And so when Vince is doing all the analysis, we will be out in the field, probably not at 6 a.m. like normal. It's been cold. But we'll be in the field doing more equipment installation, maintaining the network for that exact reason. So that we can continue to provide data. And so that work, maybe not just to you and I have had this conversation a lot, but that work will continue. And we're continuing to do it. We're improving our data. We've got real-time stuff that we didn't have before when we initially started on this. So that work has continued, equipment installations, data collection. We're looking at other wells. Vince and I have been on the phone with Allard with his team, but looking at strategically, where are we missing data? Where are the data gaps? We're seeing blocks from Gomez up towards the southern or middle part of Pinto Valley, completely different. Well, where does it stop? What are the well completions? What do the borehole logs look like? We've talked about E-line or getting some geophysical logs on some of these, understanding aquifers. How is this Swiss cheese connected? All of that work is continuing. And so while we've delayed the rules, while we're looking at BFC stuff, the data collection and the instrumentation that is being implemented and deployed in the field has not stopped. So that work has continued. And again, somebody, he's going to need to look at all this, and we're going to keep providing millions of data points. But that data effort will continue and has continued, hasn't stopped, hasn't been delayed.
Well, I appreciate it. Okay, let's get back on topic with what we got. We got to decide what we're going to do. Does anyone have any more questions with connections to our frameworks? If not, I'm going to make a motion. I move that we instruct Mr. Claus to pursue A and B and come back with those metrics and that information to this board.
I second it as soon as possible. Yes, right.
Well, we're gonna,
When can we do that?
we're fixing, just hang on,
All right.
hang on.
Just because
Everybody wants to cut the corner and get to the end, but just hang on.
That's fine. I second it.
We have, well, Mr. Millie's already seconded it. I made the motion and it's been seconded that we instruct Mr. Claus to pursue frameworks A and B. Is there any additional discussion about it? Not, those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Now, yes, we're going to talk about that because we have a date reserved for next week on Tuesday, but I don't know if he's going to be able to pull that one off, but we'll get there. Right now, I want to jump down to number 11 because that's also Mr. Claus.
He might need a break.
He may need a break, but I'm trying to get him where he can go home if he wants to.
Let's power through this.
There you go.
I like it. Let's go. Rock 'em, sock 'em. Okay, discussion possible action direction to the district hydrologist to apply for Texas Water Development Board scientific grant.
It depends on what he gets done on this next week.
Well,
Sorry.
This is just a grant application.
That still run through my mind.
These grants just recently became available, as I recall. Greg or Vince can correct me if I'm remembering any of it incorrectly. I heard about it at the GMA 7 meeting 4 or 5 months back from a Texas Water Development Board representative who was speaking at that meeting. And there's a bunch of money that's become available to GCDs for grants. And I believe it's tied to science. It has to be tied to science, what we're going to spend the money on. Couldn't be more timely for what we're doing right now. All we got to do is give them authorization to try and seek what we want to
So
see.
it ties into Mr. Bruton's science and his science, or is it just strictly on your side of the?
No, it's a
No, it's all up.
catch-all for science and data collection. This opened, I believe, on the 16th of January in terms of the ability for districts to submit applications. There's no expectation that a district submits early. They have an informational meeting on the 30th of this week here. So that's going to be, is that tomorrow? It's on my calendar, Friday. Yeah, Friday.
8:30 to 10.
Okay, y'all been getting the emails the district has. And so there is a link there that others, board members can use if they want to tune in, but they're going to give us more information on the program. What we currently know is it can pretty much be used for anything outside of education, outreach, or internal staff augmentation. When they say data collection in science, it's very, very broad.
How about a monitoring well?
It can include monitoring wells. It can include pump tests. It can include database management.
We need to own one
systems.
to do that. So maybe that's a thought.
It can cover a lot of ground. Now, here's the catch: the minimum request has to be 50,000, and your maximum request can only be 300,000. We're under the impression is the more you
I like max.
the more you request, the less likely you are to get the grant. Is our current assumption on this. So there is a minimum $50,000 request requirement. So if you want equipment, you can get a lot of equipment for $50,000, and that's the minimum. But this also is allowing for districts to get creative and think outside the box in terms of things that have been on their wish list, but haven't necessarily been a priority. So I've spoken with some districts where they're pursuing conceptual model updates similarly to what this GCD is already providing us to do, or support to do this year. Some GCDs are using this because they wanted a database management system, so an interactive web platform for tracking all the permittees, production data with some sort of interactive public base. Some GCDs are interested in pursuing it for that. Another GCD I know of, they're interested in using it for a monitor well. They're a little bit shallower. They only have to drill down about 300 feet to hit the bottom of their aquifer. But what they want to do is they want to do a nested monitor well, where they've got a section that goes to the deeper portion of the Trinity aquifer, and then an upper section that utilizes the well annular space that completes in the middle Trinity section. So they can actually use this to monitor water levels at 2 different aquifers. And then they can also do pump tests on the lower level to see how that's impacting the middle level. So districts are getting all sorts of creative on this. Some are using it to fund numerical models. This money does have a spend by date, which is the I believe it's in 2028. So they are giving you a little bit of time on this to spend the money. What we're being told is it's no strings attached money, but of course there's still going to be some strings at the end of the day.
Just this thing.
You'll have to meet some TWDB grant requirements. So we all still have questions. We're hoping this information meeting they have is helpful. It's hopeful that this money is used to help accelerate science, data collection, in one way or another. And the grant application gives you a whole list of what qualifies, and it's pretty much anything you could ever dream of.
In all honesty, I think probably the best thing that we could do with this is direct our consultants and general manager to get together and tell us what we need. Come back and then we can vote on whether we want to go for a grant for those items. Yeah. Because I don't think that we can sit here tonight and say, oh, well, let's do a well, or oh, let's do this. I think we need to have them tell us what they need science-wise, and then we can decide if we want to do a grant for that.
And I believe the deadline is March 13th or 16th. I'm a little fuzzy on what that date is because it's over a month out currently. So there's still time, is the point I'm trying to make.
Does that sound reasonable to the rest of the board?
Yeah, I think we should apply for a grant for sure.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying, I mean, my point is having our folks tell us what they need instead of us guessing it.
So is that requesting Jim and I to collaborate with, come up
So
with ideas?
if everybody is in, unless somebody has some other point that they need to make, I'm gonna make that in the form of a motion that Mr. Claus, Jim, Ms. Burton, and Ms. Hobbs talk and come up with a suggestion on what we can go for this grant. And then we can come back at the next meeting and we can vote that up or down, and then they can pursue it.
Include Marty in on that too.
Yep.
She may have something she's
Yes,
thinking about.
yes. Well, I mean all the consultants. It's for consultants and the general manager to get together and tell us, hey, guys, we need this piece, we need this instrument, we need that instrument, we need this, that, and the other. Compile it all up, we'll come up with a price, and then we'll decide if we're going to go for a grant for it.
I'll second it.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously.
Director Robinson, there is, and I appreciate Vince, you bringing this up, but we have gotten the invite from Texas Water Development Board here in this office at 8:30. It's Hobbs, Marty, myself, and Carlos. Vince won't be here, but he'll be participating somewhere else. But there is a workshop. Texas Water Development Board is going to go through the rules and all the grant stuff, and we're going to sit here in the office and joint meeting and just watch that. That's on the schedule. Any of the board members want to come join? I don't know what the rules are, but if you want to just sit and watch it with us.
3 of us can come.
Whatever, but we are going to be our members of the public.
Unless we post.
But I think that's a great suggestion. I think there's some great things. I think the geophysical work could be part of that. So it could be a multi-pronged approach.
What day?
This Friday, the 30th at 8:30 in the morning, 8 to 10, is that right?
8 to 10.
Yeah, or 8:30 to 10.
8:30 to 10.
10.
Sorry, yeah.
Is there any money for recharge then?
Yeah, recharge.
I mean, really, that's what
I've been complaining about that one for 30 years, man.
And not to toot your horn, but Friesen Nichols is in a great spot for this. They know a lot about Texas Water Development Board. They've got a grant writing application part of that. And so that part's good. Just for the board deciding what to do, let's get together and see what best fits where we're at.
And managed stock per recharge, that does fall under this. So, I mean, there's a lot of options here.
I mean, when you have that big rain and you catch it, but it's coming towards these springs, they're just going to play that much longer.
Okay, we still got some items to get through here, gentlemen. Let's see. All right, let's get back on track. Discussion, possible action, approval of minutes from the December 16th regular meeting and January 6th special meeting.
I think Vince is good to go, isn't he?
Yeah, Vince is good to go.
It's too quick of a turnaround for me
Okay, so Tuesday is out for you?
to get this done right.
Okay. Yeah, I want to let you go, but I also, we do need to address this really quickly. what kind of time frame roughly are you looking at before you come back? Because we're gonna have to talk about when we're gonna have a special meeting.
If you want it a week before, I can get it to you in 2 weeks,
In 2 weeks? Okay,
but I can get it to you in 2 weeks.
we'll talk about it. 2
Yeah.
weeks or better. That's what you're
I
looking
can
for.
get it to you in 2 weeks, but
No sooner.
You got 10 days.
No sooner.
I can do that.
Okay.
Thanks, Vince.
Yeah, of course.
That's it, Travis.
Take care.
Be careful.
Take care. Thank you.
Okay, gentlemen, any additions or corrections?
I'll make a motion that we approve those minutes.
Second. I didn't even know where we were at. Jumped around through.
On the minutes.
So we got to the minutes. We're on number 5.
Oh, okay.
Okay, motion's been made and and seconded to approve the minutes of December 16th, 2025, and regular meeting and January 5th, 2026 special meeting. Is there any discussion? If not, will everyone in favor please raise your right hand? All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously, 7-0. Number 6, general manager's report.
Okay, since the last board meeting, we've had 3 applications for exempt wells. All 3 of them happen to be out on Highway 334, Camp Woods Road. A little further up, not quite West Prong, but in that general area. GMA, let's see, GMA 10 will be meeting on February 9th, San Antonio. GMA 7 will be meeting the 18th in Sonora. And in Region J, there's not a time frame set for that yet. That's all I have to report.
Okay. Moving on, number 7, review Texas Water Development Board drought index and aquifer monitoring data.
We did that. Or no?
Yeah, we kind of talked about it to some extent during other stuff, but I mean, we have an agenda item. So if anybody has any questions on it, I mean, now's the time to get it. And here we go. We got this one too. $27.
Yep.
There you go.
I say, Mr. Briggs, but that's pretty non-relevant right now.
That's a good joke. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about our aquifer monitoring data at this point for Mr. Burton? Otherwise, I'm going to move on.
You want to say something? Oh, come on.
I think the thing that.
Just had to egg him on, didn't you?
Yeah, he has to go on. I'm just saying, in some parts of the county, I think everything's been said, but you're under artesian pressure and some of the pumping is still pumping exactly the same under artesian pressure. And you've got water a few feet above the ground, in some cases more than that. So, and then in some places, water levels are still going down. And you know, this is the challenge. It's the $1 million question. How do we figure this out? And it's not, if there was data, you know, we've got some correlations that are all of those wells that are in that package that we rattled off. Those wells track about with each other. 2 wells at 190 or 1190 or whatever, 93 or some of these other ones. And then at other places, water's still coming up. So
There is commonality amongst everyone here, you know, whether you're concerned about the Ford or whether you happen to have a permit. And it boils down to one trinity. How much water is there? Which way is it going? And how much of it can we sustainably use? And that's all anybody wants to know.
It's all honeycomb, so it's all going every different direction.
But that's the commonality. We all want to know that answer. We all want to know those answers, every bit of it. Okay, moving on. Number 7, discussion possible action. Kinney County Appraisal District offered by Travis Bonner to purchase trust property, City of Brackettville, block 42, lots 5 and 7. It's 5 and 11, excuse me. I have not looked at that one. Oh, I don't think we got anything in the packet on it.
It is.
Oh, there it is, 7 or 9. Oh, I was looking at the wrong number.
Make a motion, we approve.
I will
Is this
second that
number 9 we're talking
motion.
about?
Yes.
Number 9, okay.
I will second that motion. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. You get those back on the roll, and Mr. Bonner can start paying us a little taxes. Number 10, discussion possible action disposal of district pickup. Mr. Ellis, we're going to have to get you off of mute for this one.
Mr. President,
Disposal is a little
can we
word.
approve it until next month?
I don't mind tabling it. The board's pleasure.
I'll make a motion, we table this for next month.
I'll second it.
District has a
It's getting it done today.
Well,
Messing around.
we've got an old two-wheel drive
Second.
truck with
Let's go.
seating up batteries. We don't know exactly what's wrong with it. That's the one we're trying to figure out how to get rid of.
What year model? I may be interested in that myself. I'm a foot.
Well, we got to go through it. We've got to go through the legal. We got to go through the legal process to get rid of it. Yeah, I wouldn't mind. Sir. Yeah. If he drags it out of here, right?
Get my mule or my tractor just to get it on. My truck's not running again.
All right,
I'm sorry.
we got a motion. We got a motion and a second to table this one. Everybody in favor, please raise your right hand.
I ain't looking at
All
the truck
opposed,
yet.
same sign. All right, we'll pick this up next month.
Who seconded that? I'm sorry.
I did quite quickly, as a matter of fact. Okay, discussion possible action financial statements for December 2025.
Read this off.
Go right ahead, Rick.
Do you need to read it?
Yeah, I think so.
I move that we accept it.
Yeah, that'll work. Go ahead.
Well, we can do it that way. And hey, I'm just going to say for the record,
You don't have to read it like.
yeah, well, we're just going to say for the record, we got $434,183.21 in our money market account, $57.93 in our general fund, and $316 in petty cash, $4,000 in well log deposits, tax pools, $844,655, and we've got two CDs, one at $135,000 and one at $256,000, almost $257,000. That's the recap. Now, all those in favor of accepting, we got a motion. Who second? You second? All those in favor, raise your right hand. Bing. Motion carries unanimously.
This has been a meeting, man. Everybody's.
Okay. Well, I just for the record, I apologize. I did what I did on that particular agenda item because of the public interest in it and the fact that last meeting we had to listen to people tell us what it was all about before we heard the guy that wrote it tell us what it was about. And it didn't make any sense to me to try and do that way. My goal is to get us to some kind of compromise decision on a DFC.
He's got to go home anyway, further than we do. So,
Well,
yeah.
to me, this is a long shot to get there. We've still got a long way to go to get to a new DFC, but this was the only way that we might get through it for that item. And that's why I did it this way. It's also why I've encouraged this board to have special meetings for these types of items that aren't in our business meetings because they take more time. We should, and they should, because we need to allow the public to speak, to tell us what they think. Anyway, review monthly investment report, which I think we kind of did that one, didn't we?
Pass it.
You can move to pass it. That is just fine.
That's just a review item.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We don't even have to do that one. That's a review item. So clicking along. 14, where are we at? I hope Mr. Ellis is still on there somewhere. Discussion possible action, invoices received and invoices paid. Number 14. I'll move that we approve the invoices received and invoices paid.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor, raise your right hand. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries unanimously. Number 15, director's request to include specific items on future agenda.
I thought there was one of those that we were supposed to approve for to send to audit.
You thought there was, what?
Whenever we made the approval on one of those, it was to spend it. Which one was it? Maybe better to go back and modify now than later on.
Yeah, submit
Which one
the
was it?
following for audit. Matt, is that the one you read usually?
That's the.
Oh, invoices for receipt.
Yeah, we
That's
better do that right now.
That's right. That's right. The way that was supposed to, the way that motion was supposed to be was move to submit the invoices received and invoices paid to the auditor.
Well, you're talking about the wording.
That's the wording of the motion. Yes, that's the way we were supposed to. That's I keep forgetting that one.
That's the financial statement.
Oh, is it the financial statement?
Yes, sir.
Oh, it's not the invoice. So we screwed up two back. Okay. That's my bad.
We'll fix it.
We'll get it straight. Director's request includes specific items on the future agenda. I know we got a tabled item. We're going to come back to.
Well, and I did have a request from the last meeting myself.
That's correct. And
Of course, I understand this meeting was too damn long anyway, so we can just put it back on there again, please.
we will.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm going to make a note of that right here.
Do you remember where it was?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. Do I need to state it for the minutes and records?
No, that one's good. You good?
I have a question. So earlier, and I don't know if this is a future agenda item or a rules change, how we go about it, but it was mentioned like wells, like permitted wells going in. Can we make that a rule to where they have to allow us to put, or is that a rule to put monitoring systems on there? Where it's as if they apply for it, that's a given. That's gonna be on there.
That's not currently a rule, but you can make it a rule. Greg can.
Yeah, the way I understand 36, we can make things more restrictive as we go forward.
Yeah, we can't make the ones that have already been
Right.
submitted, but moving forward, we can.
But
if
moving forward, I think you can do that.
So is that a rule? Is that a rule change, or is that
You
something?
might be able to pull that one off.
The wells that are being submitted for a permit now were the test wells, correct? So they already have the monitoring on them. They're already monitored.
Well, they have.
I'll say like
That's for
moving
later
forward,
on.
if they apply for a well, a permitted well,
Well, yeah,
in that rule that they have to allow us to put some type of monitoring system.
Yeah, I would allow your attorney to weigh in, but I believe.
Oh yeah. No, I want to hear what Greg has to say about this, but I love the idea. Okay, because going forward, that gives us data on new boreholes as they occur throughout the county. No, I think it's a brilliant idea. I just don't know if we can do it legally. Greg, are you there?
I heard
I'm here.
We're Ben tossed out the idea of whether or not we could possibly create a rule here in the future that as production wells come in and a new production well comes in and wants to be permitted for regular permit, can we require them to allow us to put monitoring equipment on their well? Can we make a rule to do that? Is that feasible?
Yeah, yes, it's within your authority to require whatever devices, measuring devices of any kind that you need to have on a well as part of a permit. You can require metering of the usage. You can require, and you can even require, and I would restrict this to certain size wells, very large wells. You can require that they install a monitoring well nearby to track what the impact that pumping is having on the rest of the aquifer.
And
So, yeah, I would say that you have the authority to adopt whatever monitoring you feel is necessary.
now, thinking along those lines, while this might not be something for the next agenda meeting, but if we start looking at the test permit rules and the way the monitoring is occurring with that, and we start reevaluating those rules, could we add to that as far as what instrumentation we're going to require that we monitor in that well and use in the surrounding wells to figure out what the impact is to what those folks are doing. And we kind of revamp that to include some of this. That we've got more data in case no one files interested party status.
Wouldn't that kind of the purpose of a test well is to have it monitored?
Well, that's the way
they're all monitored, because the ones,
well,
unless there's more test wells I don't know about, but I had all
Well, here's-
7 of them. The records,
here's the
and they were
hole.
showing every pumping month.
Let me explain to you the hole that I see within the test permit rules that we have. Okay. The hole is if we don't have someone sign up for interested party status and allow us to monitor their well, then we don't get any data out of the process. Right? We just let them do it for a
So what's the
year.
purpose of the test?
Well, we just let them do it for a year. We get no data, and then we got nothing to tell them. No, you can't have it because we don't know whether they impact anybody or not. So, my idea is to get the data. We want the data. So, can we revamp?
Yeah, this takes it out of an option for them. We have
Bingo.
the rights to do that. if
Right.
They do this.
And that's what I'm trying to say. Maybe we need to put that not only in a permitted well. Okay, maybe we need to look at that kind of thing in these test rules. So,
like you said, borehole or depth. Like if anything beyond.
Well, we
this
already
well
have,
or this depth needs.
we already have a requirement. If you want interested party status, you have to have a well, and you have to give the district you have to give them the option to monitor that well during the period. Okay. I think we need to go down that a little further. We need to get in that a little bit more.
Monitoring system around it.
And that's why my question is that a rule change? Is that something how do we go about changing that?
No, it'll have to be a rule change. And I suspect some of this is probably going to be suggested by Vince once he gets into suggested rule changes, because there are going to be a lot of those after, well, I would expect they'll probably come around sometime between March and April of this year. We get past this part. Any other future agenda items we want to discuss?
Not to hound on the Tularosa well too much, but who owns it now?
Texas Water Development Board.
Would they sell it to us? Could we acquire it?
That's a great question. I don't know. I mean, that's great. What Director Ward's asking if Texas Water Development Board will allow the district to acquire that location.
I doubt it. I think they'll allow you access to information and data from that location.
Yeah,
but I
they
don't
give
think
us
they're
all
gonna
the
give you that
information.
location.
And just for this board's,
Sell it to you.
we have access to
won't
that
sell it to
data. I'm pulling that
They'll
in
sell it to
API
They
into
will?
a database on
That's
our
what he
server.
said.
Yeah, they'll sell it to us, right?
It's public.
Great.
They will give it to you.
You can ask. It doesn't hurt to ask. I doubt they'll do it.
Well,
but
for
you
future
can
planning,
ask.
we're supposed to own our own well, and they may be.
Well, no. Let's clarify this. We don't have to own the well. We want a governmental entity to own a well, or we want to own a well. That way we're guaranteed access.
Are they a governmental entity?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's on their website. You can go to Water Data for Texas, Tularosa well, and that data is published. And typically they post it once a day. And for the most part, it's been fair. I mean, it's gone down a few times, but it's reliable. I mean, the data.
But what if we don't apply for a $300,000 grant? We just ask them for the well.
I think they're going to charge money. There are other wells though that you may not be that much.
I'm just trying to paint a picture here.
You could redevelop something here in town potentially. Might be cheaper to buy a property. Own a property and a well.
Who could talk to the Texas Water Development Board? You want me to talk to them? You want to authorize me to talk to them?
Do you need property if you drill in a highway easement?
Is there an inactive well somewhere that we could?
Well, TxDOT has that well at the rest stop that they're not using. I mean, we monitor it. The problem with that one, you're getting into areas that aren't real correlated with the spring. So I don't know if that's going to help you.
That one doesn't work. All right. I think we got a lot of things to think about that don't pertain to future agenda items, but we'll come up with that next month. Unless somebody has something else they want to put on the agenda, let's move on. Let's take a quick.
Director Robinson, you had mentioned that USGS about adding that as the future agenda item. Is that something that you'd want to discuss or now or wait till later?
If the board wants to take that up at the next meeting, I do not
I don't
have
know
a.
if that's something urgent necessarily, but
I don't think it's critical for what we're doing right at the moment. But I mean, if the board wants to take it up at the next meeting, it's fine by me. I think
Maybe the
redundant.
regular-
I think the argument of redundancy in that spring flow data is good. I mean, I can't argue against that. We need that.
Yeah, but I mean, can't we, if it's not correlated with what we're gonna have these special meetings for, then can't we put it on the regular monthly one?
Yeah. No. We can put it. We put it on the regular monthly meeting. No problem.
a wish list for months down the road at some point. I mean, we've been talking about it ever since 2014 when the USGS moved it. There was issues and we talked about just going down and looking at it, whether it's reliable or not. I mean, it says zero spring flow and there can be 2 feet of water.
Why don't you tell me or Janelle when you need it on the agenda, and we'll put it on there when you're ready, because I'm sure you're going to go look at different types of devices for potential backup for that, and then you'll have to tell us what it is. So
I think that's a better suggestion. Let's put some research in and come back
And the
we can have
location.
something to talk about.
yeah, well he'll have to look for location and all that kind of good stuff.
It's going to be very inexpensive. You won't need 300,000.
Then find a place to put 12 of them.
Yeah.
We'll monitor every creek.
Monitor it, the more we know.
Yeah, yes, sir.
I am going to put a note on here though, because I don't want to forget that.
How do kids don't tamper with that monitor? I've never even looked at that monitor there. I mean, could they?
It's just a gate. It just tells you the height of the water, and based on their manual measurements, they develop a rating curve, and it's just an estimate. And based on the depth of the water coming across that, yeah.
Don't you have a problem with that?
I've got a lot of problems because but it's what we've got. It's what's there, and all things being equal,
Better than nothing.
It overestimates and underestimates, and so it all cancels out. And this is what you've got. It's a standard.
Well, you got the drain.
We need
you
a
got
more
the drain
accurate
that comes in from the city.
We're gonna
In
monitor
between.
And certainly how the board operates the pool.
So
and
you're,
dump
is this
water
thing
out.
like a gauge?
Well,
Like
I don't know.
I mean, can somebody not just go tie the wire?
Sounds to me like they're just guessing.
Yeah, they do.
Okay, gentlemen, we got one more agenda item to do, which is the general manager's evaluation. I'm going to suggest a 5-minute break. Pause for the cause, and we'll get into that because it's going to be an executive session anyway. Any objections? Okay. We're going to take a recess. 5 minutes. Okay, we are back from recess in session, and we only have one agenda item, which is discussion possible action, general manager's evaluation. So at this time, we are going to go into executive session. Now we're going to run Mr. Olson out. Manager's evaluation. Do we need to accept the general manager's evaluation? Is that a required action?
Yeah, yes, I think it'd be a good idea to have a motion second to accept the general manager's evaluation. And as you mentioned, place a future work plan on the next agenda.
I will move that we accept the general manager's evaluation and place work plan on the next regular meeting agenda. So we can come up with a work plan for the following year.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second, third.
Motion's been made and seconded. Motion's been made by Director Bland, seconded by Director Minley to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye.